Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was reborn in My Hero Academia and built a harem with Ochaco, Momo, and Nejire. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. A New Leaf. The hum of the city was a constant, a low-grade thrum of life that vibrated through the worn tires of his moped and up into his bones. Naruto Uzumaki navigated the crowded streets of Musutafu with a practiced ease. A splash of orange from his delivery jacket, a fleeting comet in the river of cars and pedestrians. He kept his head down, not out of fear or shyness, but out of a deep-seated habit forged in a lifetime he no longer lived. To be seen was to be known, and to be known was to be burdened. He'd had enough burdens for 10 lifetimes. This one was supposed to be different. He pulled up to a curb, kicking down the stand and dismounting in a single fluid motion. The delivery was a small, unassuming box for a downtown office building. Just another package in a city that ran on them. As he waited for the automated security gate to scan his credentials, his eyes drifted to a massive holoscreen mounted on the side of a skyscraper. Endeavor, the number 2 hero, was engulfed in a maelstrom of his own fire, incinerating a monstrous sludge villain. The crowd in the plaza below cheered, their phones held high like offerings to a modern god. Children wore miniature versions of his flaming mask, and vendors sold scorched-looking snacks called flashfire buns. Naruto felt a familiar, hollow ache in his chest. He didn't resent the heroes. He respected the ideal, the courage it took to stand between the innocent and the monstrous. But this was different. This was a spectacle. It was branding. It was a career. In his world, being a Kage had been a duty, a soul-crushing, bone-grinding responsibility that you carried until it put you in the ground. Here, it was a ladder to climb, complete with rankings, approval ratings, and merchandise. He'd seen a pillowcase, say with All Might's face on it last week. It was surreal. The gate beeped, and he pushed the moped through, locking it in the designated service bay. He took the service elevator, the silence a welcome reprieve from the city's noise. He'd been in this world for 17 years, born again with memories that felt like ghost limbs, phantom aches of a life fully lived. He remembered the sharp tang of ozone before Ichidori, the earthy smell of the toads of Mount Myoboku, the weight of the Hokage's hat on his head. He remembered Kurama's rumbling voice in the back of his mind, a constant cantank. Rue's companion now replaced by a profound silence. The silence was the hardest part. His new power, his quirk, was a pale but potent echo of what he once was. The doctors had called it vitality, a ridiculously simple name for something so complex. It was his life force, an inner sun that granted him impossible strength, speed, and resilience. He could shape it, push it out of his body in concussive bursts, and even mold it into solid, independent clones of himself. It was a sage's power, stripped of its divine nature and crammed into the scientific definition of a quirk. He had no elemental affinities, no Rasengan, no summoning scrolls, but he had control, honed over a lifetime of war. And he had a piece of Kurama's energy, a dense, volatile core sealed deep within him, a final gift he refused to touch. It was a doomsday weapon, and he was done with those. He made the delivery, got the digital signature, and was back in the elevator before the office workers had even registered his presence. His life was a series of simple loops. Wake up, work, train his body, eat, sleep. He trained not to become a hero, but because his body hummed with a power that demanded release. To let it street, Agnate felt like a betrayal of the vessel he'd been given. His final delivery was on the way back to his small apartment on the city's edge. He guided the moped through a commercial district, the smell of grilled meat and sweet sauces filling the air. He parked, his stomach growling. A day's work deserved a reward. He found what he was looking for. A small, traditional-looking stall with a faded banner that read, Ichiraku Ramen. It wasn't the Ichiraku, but the name alone was a balm to his soul. He ordered a miso pork ramen, the largest size they had, and sat at the small counter. The old man behind the wok nodded, his movements practiced and efficient. As Naruto waited, the world tilted on its axis. It began not with a bang, but with a sickening crunch. A sound like a building-sized jaw chewing on concrete. The ground shuddered. People on the street stumbled, crying out in alarm. Naruto was on his feet in an instant, his bowl of ramen forgotten. His senses, always heightened by the passive flow of his vitality, exploded with information. Multiple impacts. The distinct scent of ozone and something acrid, like burning plastic. Screams. Sharp. Terrified. Not just civilians. A hero. He tossed a few bills onto the counter. "Keep the change, old man," he said, his voice level, but his eyes were already distant, scanning the unfolding chaos. He moved, not running, but flowing through the panicked crowd. People were a river, and he was a stone, letting the current part around him. He rounded a corner and saw it. The entire intersection was a war zone. A trio of villains had turned it into their personal playground. One was a hulking brute with skin like cracked obsidian, methodically smashing cars and tossing them aside. Another was a lithe woman, almost a blur, dashing between panicked civilians and slashing at them with hands that dripped a viscous, bubbling acid. The third was the worst. A gaunt man in a tattered coat who simply touched things, a lamppost, a storefront, he asphalt itself, and they would crumble into brittle dust. The local pro-hero, a man in a metal suit called Carapace, was trying to contain the brute, but his armor was dented and cracked. He was being overwhelmed. "Fall back. Get the civilians out," Carapace yelled at the police, who were trying and failing to form a perimeter. The acid-spewing woman cackled, melting a section of road and trapping a family in their car. The gaunt man reached for a support pillar of a pedestrian overpass. Naruto's jaw tightened. He saw the dominoes lining up. The pillar would go, the overpass would fall, and dozens of people would be crushed. The heroes were outmatched. The system was failing. Right here, right now. He remembered a promise he'd made to himself, standing over the graves of his friends, the world peaceful but scarred. "Never again. I will never again stand by and watch people suffer if I can do something." That promise hadn't died with his old body. He slipped into an alleyway, the orange of his jacket a liability. He tore it off, leaving him in a simple black t-shirt and cargo pants. He took a single, deep breath, and the world sharpened. The low hum of his vitality swelled into a silent roar within him. He could feel every panicked heartbeat in a 2-block radius, could sense the vibrations of the crumbling pillar, could smell the chemical composition of the woman's acid. Priorities. 1. Civilians. 2. Neutralize threats. 3. Minimize exposure. He pressed his palm against the brick wall of the alley. "Let's go," he whispered. In 3 separate locations around the disaster zone, a figure shimmered into existence from nothing. They were perfect copies of him, solid and real, each one moving with purpose. One clone appeared beside the trapped family's car. The acid was eating through the tires. The vehicle sinking. The father was trying to break the window, his fist bloody. "Everyone, stay calm," the clone said, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of panic. The family stared at him. This stranger who had appeared from nowhere. The clone placed a hand on the roof of the car. He didn't lift it. He simply channeled a gentle, focused pulse of energy, and the warped doorframes groaned and popped open. "Out, now. Move toward the police line. Don't look back." He herded them out, his body a shield between them and the battle. Another clone materialized next to a young police officer hiding behind a squad car. "What's the situation?" the clone asked. The officer jumped, fumbling his radio. Who are you?" "Back up," the clone said simply. "Where are people trapped?" "The overpass. It's going to collapse, and there are people in the east side shops." "Got it," the clone said, and sprinted away, a blur of motion too fast for the officer to track. He arrived at the base of the overpass, where the third clone was already pressing its hands against the crumbling support pillar, a faint golden light seeping from its palms into the cracks, reinforcing it, holding it together through sheer force of will. With the civilians being managed and the structure stabilized, the original Naruto moved. His first target was the catalyst, the man in the gaunt coat. He was the most dangerous. Naruto flowed through the chaos, a ghost. The villain was reaching for the wall of a department store, a sadistic grin on his face. He never saw it coming. Naruto's hand chopped down, not on his neck or head, but on the juncture of his shoulder and collarbone. It wasn't a powerful blow, but it was impossibly precise. The villain's eyes went wide as his entire nervous system seized. He crumpled like a puppet with its strings cut, unconscious before he hit the ground. One down. The acid-spewing woman spun around, sensing the shift. "Who's there?" she shrieked, flinging a volley of acid where Naruto had been a second before. The pavement hissed and dissolved. Naruto was already behind her. "You're fast," he said, his voice calm. She whirled, her face a mask of rage, and swiped at him. He leaned back, the sizzling droplets of acid passing inches from his face. He didn't counter. He just watched, his eyes tracking her movements, her footwork, her center of gravity. She was all aggression, no discipline. "Stop moving so I can melt you," she screamed, launching into a wild flurry of attacks. Naruto moved with her, a dance of deadly consequence. He sidestepped, ducked, and weaved, never taking a single step back. He was letting her burn herself out. He could feel her quirk starting to strain, the acid becoming thinner, less potent. After a few more seconds of frantic, useless attacks, she lunged, a desperate, telegraphed move. He stepped inside her guard, his palm not striking, but open. He placed it gently on her stomach. She blinked, confused. Then he pushed. It wasn't a physical push. It was a wave of pure, concentrated vitality. It was colorless, soundless, but she felt it like a physical blow to her soul. Her quirk sputtered and died. Her breath hitched. The energy, her life force, was violently but harmlessly disrupted. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed, completely inert. Two down. Now, only the brute remained. Carapace, the pro-hero, was on his knees, his armor looking like crumpled tinfoil. The obsidian-skinned giant raised a massive fist to deliver the final blow. "Hey!" The voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the din. The brute turned. Naruto stood 20 yards away, in the center of the ruined intersection, hands in his pockets. He looked like a teenager who had gotten lost on his way home from school. The brute laughed, a low, grating sound. "You're next, little man." He charged, each footstep cracking the pavement. He was a freight train of muscle and rock. Naruto didn't move, he just watched him come, his expression unreadable. 10 yards away. 5. The brute swung a fist the size of a manhole cover. Naruto raised one hand. He didn't catch the punch. He didn't block it. At the last possible microsecond, he met the incoming fist with his own open palm. There was no thunderclap, no shockwave. There was only a dull, resonant thump, like a bell being struck with a padded hammer. The brute's momentum stopped dead. All of it. The kinetic energy had nowhere to go. It traveled back up his arm, shattering the obsidian plating like glass. He stared at his arm, then at Naruto, his brain unable to process what had just happened. "My turn," Naruto said softly. He clenched his fist. The air around it seemed to warp, to compress. A sphere of pure, churning life force, raw and untamed, coalesced over his knuckles. It wasn't a Rasengan. It had no spin, no blade-like cutting power. It was just pressure, a miniature sun of pure vitality. He punched forward, aiming for the brute's center mass. The sphere of energy connected. And this time, there was a sound. A deafening whoomp of displaced air. The brute's obsidian skin didn't just crack, it disintegrated. He was launched backward, not flying, tumbling through the air like a ragdoll. He crashed through the front of an empty bus and didn't move again. Incapacitated, not dead. Naruto was very precise about that. 3 down. The intersection fell into a sudden, shocked silence. The only sounds were the distant sirens, the crackle of a few small fires, and the whimpering of a scared child being led away by one of Naruto's clones. The clones, their tasks complete, dispelled into puffs of smoke, a detail that went unnoticed in the wider chaos. Naruto stood in the quiet aftermath, the faint golden aura around him fading. He rolled his shoulder, working out a kink. He hadn't even broken a sweat. He just wanted to go home, eat some ramen, and forget this ever happened. That was when the sky darkened. A shadow fell over him, and he looked up to see a mountain of a man descending from the heavens. The man landed with a heavy thud that barely shook the ground, his signature V-shaped hair antennae and his world-famous smile firmly in place. Though the smile looked a little strained. "Fear not, for I am here." All Might's voice boomed, a sound that usually brought comfort and hope. But the fight was already over. He looked from the unconscious villains to the stabilized overpass, to the distinct lack of civilian casualties, and then to the lone teenager standing in the middle of it all. The hero's smile faltered, replaced by genuine, unadulterated shock. "Young man." All Might said, his voice losing its performative boom. The situation appears to be resolved. Who are you?" Naruto met the gaze of the symbol of peace. He saw the immense power. But he also saw the fatigue behind the smile, the flicker of a dying flame. He sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "Just a delivery guy," he said, turning to walk away. "Late for my last drop." He picked up his discarded jacket and disappeared into the crowd before All Might could say another word. In a darkened, high-tech office overlooking the city, a man with the head of a mouse, or was it a bear? Or a dog? Sipped his tea. Principal Nezu of UA High School watched the footage for the 10th time. It was a chaotic mess of shaky phone videos and compromised security cameras. But he had the best analysis software in the world. He slowed it down, enhanced it, watched it frame by frame. A figure in a black t-shirt moving like a whisper. A hand gesture that stabilized a collapsing structure. 3 of the city's most wanted villains, each with a quirk that made them a nightmare for conventional heroes, taken down in under 90 seconds. By one person. The final move, that compressed ball of energy. The sensors had picked up a massive, localized spike of an unknown energy type. It wasn't heat, or kinetic, or electrical. It was just power. Raw and pure. Fascinating, Nezu chirped, his tail twitching in delight. Shota Aizawa, slumped in a chair opposite the desk, grunted. Fascinatingly dangerous. He's unregistered, unknown, and operating on a power level that rivals the top 10. He incapacitated 3A rank villains without breaking a sweat and then just walked away. That's not a hero, that's a force of nature. We're lucky he seems to be on our side. Oh, I don't believe in luck, Nezu said, setting his teacup down. I believe in variables, and this young man is the most interesting variable I have seen in my entire career. Look at this. He isolated footage of one of the clones. He can create solid, autonomous duplicates of himself. Not illusions, not ectoplasm. Solid matter. They think, they act, they communicate. The strategic implications are staggering. He's a menace until we know who he is and what he wants, Aizawa countered, his eyes narrowed. Precisely, which is why we must find him, Nezu said, his smile widening. The police have his face from the delivery services employee file, but his listed address is a dummy corporation, and his personal records are a ghost. He's covering his tracks. He doesn't want to be found. Aizawa sighed. So, you're going to poke the sleeping dragon. I'm going to offer it a place to roost, Nezu corrected. An individual of this caliber cannot be allowed to remain in the shadows, Aizawa. He'll either be targeted by villains or co-opted by agencies far less whimsical than ours. He needs guidance. He needs a place. And I, for one, am intensely curious about the upper limits of that quirk. 2 days later, Naruto was unlocking the door to his Spartan apartment when he felt it. A subtle shift in the air. A presence. Not hostile, but observant. He paused, his key halfway into the lock. You can come out, Naruto said to the empty hallway. I'm not a fan of being watched. From the shadows at the end of the hall, a small figure emerged. A creature in a sharp suit, with white fur, beady black eyes. And a long scar running over one of them. He held a hat in his paws. My apologies, Mr. Uzumaki, Principal Nezu said, his voice cheerful. It is a professional hazard. May I have a moment of your time? Naruto stared at the creature, his senses telling him this being was far more than he appeared. There was a razor-sharp intellect behind those eyes, a mind that was constantly calculating. You know my name. A temporary one, I suspect. Much like your address and employment history. You are a very difficult young man to find, Nezu said, taking a step closer. My name is Nezu. I'm the principal of UA High School. I saw your handiwork at the Kashidori intersection. It was, and I do not say this lightly, a masterpiece of efficiency and control. Naruto finally opened his door and stepped inside, leaving it open. An invitation. Nezu followed, his eyes taking in the bare walls, the single futon, the distinct lack of any personal effects. You live simply. I don't need much, Naruto said. Turning to face him, he crossed his arms. Get to the point. What do you want? I want to offer you a place, Nezu said, his tone shifting from cheerful to serious. A place at my school. In the hero course. On a full recommendation. The entrance exam is in 2 days, but for you, it would be a mere formality. Naruto laughed, a short, humorless sound. A hero. You saw the news. I'm a dangerous, unidentified vigilante. Why would you want that in your school? Because I am not a newscaster. I am an educator, and a strategist, Nezu said, his gaze unwavering. I saw someone with the power to level a city block use just enough force to save lives and not a drop more. I saw a commander who used his assets, his clones, for evacuation and support, not just combat. I saw restraint. That, Mr. Uzumaki, is rarer and more valuable than any amount of power. The system, as it is flawed. It produces brawlers and celebrities. It needs thinkers. It needs leaders. You can't change the game from the sidelines. So I ask you, come inside, and help me change it. Naruto stared at Nezu for a long, silent moment. He had tried to stay out. He had tried to live a small life. But the world kept pulling him back in. Maybe Nezu was right. Hiding in the shadows, waiting for disasters to happen, wasn't living freely. It was living in a self-imposed prison, waiting for the next scream. Maybe the only way to be truly free was to be strong enough to protect that freedom for others, out in the open. The entrance exam is in 2 days. Naruto asked. Nezu's smile returned, brighter than ever. Indeed, at the UA testing grounds. Be there. The UA practical exam was organized chaos. Hundreds of nervous teenagers stood before a massive gate, listening to the hero present mic scream instructions from a high tower. Naruto stood among them, feeling distinctly out of place. He wasn't nervous. He was just observing. He saw a kid with engines in his calves doing intense leg stretches. He saw a boy with spiky blonde hair who looked like he was about to murder someone just for breathing too loudly. And he saw a girl with a neat black ponytail, her expression one of intense concentration. She was creating a small, intricate pair of night vision goggles from her arm, then testing them. Creation quirk, Naruto noted. Versatile, but her expression is tight. She's overthinking it, worried about failing before it even starts. This was Momo Yaoyorozu, though he didn't know her name yet. The gates suddenly blasted open. Go, go, go. The real world doesn't have a countdown. Present Mike bellowed. While everyone else stumbled in momentary confusion, Naruto was already moving. He flowed into the fake cityscape, his footsteps silent. The recommendation meant he was already in. So this wasn't a test for him. It was a chance to observe. He saw the other examinees in action. They were powerful, flashy, and clumsy. They threw fire and ice, stretched their limbs, and fired lasers. They were also competing with each other, tripping each other up to steal points by destroying the robotic villains. It was inefficient, childish. He spotted the girl with the ponytail again. She had created a large cannon and was methodically blasting 1- and 2-point robots, but it was slow. She was leaving her back exposed, her eyes fixated on her own strategy, not the fluid reality of the battlefield. A 3-pointer, a scorpion-like machine, was bearing down on her from behind. Naruto flickered. He appeared behind the robot, tapped it once on a hydraulic joy. NT in its leg with a finger charged with a minuscule amount of vitality, and flickered away. The robot's leg seized, and it stumbled, crashing into a wall. Momo Yaoyorozu jumped, startled, and blasted it to pieces. Assuming it had simply malfunctioned. She didn't see him. He was about to move on when he saw another student, a girl with brown, bob-cut hair and a perpetually determined look on her face. She was tapping robots, making them float harmlessly into the air before releasing them, causing them to crash to the ground. Gravity manipulation, Naruto analyzed. Good for incapacitation. But she looks like she's about to be sick. A physical drawback. She was running toward a cluster of 1-pointers when she stumbled, her face pale. Near her, another boy was trapped under a pile of rubble from a stray explosion. The girl, despite her nausea, immediately changed course, forgetting the points and rushing to his aid. She started touching the pieces of debris, making them float away. Selfless, Naruto thought, a flicker of genuine respect igniting within him. She prioritizes rescue over personal gain. She's a real one. That's when the ground began to shake violently. From between the buildings, a titan emerged. The zero-pointer. It was a monstrosity of steel and circuits, taller than the highest skyscraper in the testing ground. Its sole purpose was to be an obstacle, a terrifying force to make the students scatter. And scatter they did, screaming and running in the opposite direction. The girl, Ochaco Uraraka, had just freed the trap boy when she turned and saw it. Her leg was pinned by the last piece of debris she had lifted. She was trapped directly in the path of the advancing behemoth. Her face, already pale from her quirk's overuse, went bone white with terror. There was no time for a pro-hero to intervene. No time for anyone else to act. Naruto saw it all in a fraction of a second. The girl's trapped leg, the robot's trajectory, the distance. He didn't think. He acted. He ran, not on the ground, but straight up the side of a 6-story building, his feet sticking to the sheer concrete surface as if it were flat ground. The other examinees were too busy fleeing to notice. At the rooftop, he didn't pause. He leapt, launching himself across the street, over Ochaco's head, and landed silently on the building opposite her. He knelt, pressing both palms flat against the roof's surface. He closed his eyes, his senses mapping the ground below, the foundations, the sewer lines, the bedrock. He found the point of maximum instability directly under the zero-pointer's left foot. Then he pushed his vitality into the building, down through its structure, and into the ground below. It wasn't an explosion. It was a targeted, seismic shove. On the street, the asphalt under the zero-pointer's massive foot bulged upward, then gave way. The titan, with all its immense weight and forward momentum, lost its footing. It tilted, its balance thrown completely off. It stumbled sideways like a colossal drunk, its huge metal arms scything through the air where Ochaco had been moments before. With a deafening groan of protesting metal, the zero-pointer crashed sideways into a row of buildings. Its head smashing through 3 floors before it finally came to a stop, inert and defeated. It was over in 3 seconds. Naruto dropped from the roof, landing as softly as a cat next to the terrified girl. He easily lifted the slab of concrete pinning her ankle. "You okay?" he asked, his voice steady. Ochaco Uraraka stared at him, then at the fallen giant, then back at him. Her mind was reeling. She hadn't seen what he'd done. She just knew that 1 second she was about to be crushed, and the next, the monster was gone and this boy was there. What? She stammered, her face a mixture of awe, confusion, and relief. "You were trying to save that other guy, right?" Naruto said, nodding toward the boy who was now scrambling to his feet. That was a good move. A real hero move. Before she could form a coherent reply, a buzzer echoed across the city. "Teams up." Naruto offered her a hand. She took it, his grip firm and warm. As he helped her up, he glanced over her shoulder. On a distant rooftop, he saw the girl with the ponytail, Momo Yaoyorozu, staring not at the fallen zero-pointer, but directly at him, her expression one of utter, analytical fascination. She had seen him, in a sterile, windowless room deep within the headquarters of the Hero Public Safety Commission. Director Akane Tsurugame watched a report on her monitor. It wasn't the UA exam. It was the classified file on the Kashidori incident. Subject designated, Uzumaki. An agent reported, his voice flat. Age 17. Quirk. Vitality. No records prior to 10 years ago. Analysis of his power is inconclusive, but it registers as a biological energy source of unprecedented output. He displayed tactical acumen, extreme physical abilities, and a solid light cloning ability. All Might's report confirms his combat potential is off the charts. Tsurugame, a woman with severe black hair and eyes that missed nothing, steepled her fingers. He refused to engage with All Might. He has intentionally obscured his identity. He possesses a power we cannot quantify. He is not an aspiring hero. He is a weapon of unknown allegiance walking our streets. Nezu has offered him a recommendation to UA. The agent added. Tsurugame's expression didn't change, but a coldness entered her voice. Of course he has. Nezu collects dangerous toys. Move the file on. Uzumaki. From observe to priority asset threat. Assign a handler. I want to know everything he does, everyone he speaks to. I want to know what he wants. And if he steps out of line, I want a contingency to put him down. Miles away, in a room lit only by the glow of a television, a man in a dark cloak watched a news report. It was a sensationalist piece about the mystery vigilante of the Kashidori incident. The footage was grainy, but it showed a clear image of Naruto standing in the aftermath of the fight, a faint aura of power shimmering around him. The cloaked man leaned forward, his interest piqued. A low, guttural voice, ancient and hungry, echoed in the back of his mind. So much life, so bright. The cloaked man smiled, a sliver of white teeth in the darkness. He could feel it, even through the screen. A feast, a sun in a world of candles. A vibrant new offering, the man whispered to the empty room, his eyes fixated on Naruto's image. The master will be pleased. His gateway will be glorious. Naruto stood before the towering gates of UA. High, the emblem glinting in the afternoon sun. He had never sought this. He had never wanted to be a part of this world of heroes and villains, of fame and spectacle. He had just wanted a quiet life. A bowl of ramen. A place to rest. But as he looked at the massive school, he felt the ghost of a nine-tailed fox stirring in the deepest part of his soul. He felt the weight of Nezu's challenge. He thought of the determined girl who saved others before herself, and the brilliant girl who hesitated behind a wall of her own making. He felt the unseen eyes of the commission watching him, and the faintest, coldest whisper of a threat he couldn't yet name. A quiet life was a luxury you had to fight for. He knew that better than anyone. With a resigned sigh that sounded almost like acceptance, he took the first step onto the grounds of his new life. The path to becoming a hero, or something like it, had begun. Chapter 1 End. Shaw, PTER 2. Quirk Apprehension and Unforeseen Variables. The first day of class at UA. High was an exercise in controlled chaos, and Naruto was the quiet eye of the storm. He took a seat in the back corner of Class 1A. A position that offered a tactical overview of the room and, more importantly, a degree of anonymity. He watched as his classmates filled the seats around him, a vibrant and loud collection of personalities. There was the engine-legged boy from the exam, introducing himself with rigid formality as Tenya Iida. There was the spiky-haired explosive kid, Katsuki Bakugo, who kicked his head up on his desk with a proprietary sneer. And then there were the two he recognized most clearly. Ochaco Uraraka, the gravity girl, entered with a bright, nervous energy, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on him. She gave a small, hesitant wave, a blush rising on her cheeks. He offered a simple nod in return, a silent acknowledgement that sent a new wave of pink across her face. Moments later, Momo Yaoyorozu, the creation prodigy, entered with a poised grace that seemed at odds with the flicker of anxiety in her eyes. She noticed him immediately, her gaze analytical, as if she were still trying to solve the equation of how he'd toppled the zero-pointer. Their homeroom teacher arrived not through the door, but by caterpillar shuffling into the room inside a yellow sleeping bag. Shota Aizawa, pro-hero Eraserhead, emerged looking like he hadn't slept in a week and was deeply displeased about it. "It took you 8 seconds to quiet down," Aizawa said, his voice a monotone drawl. "That's not going to work. Life is not that forgiving." He tossed a set of blue gym uniforms onto his desk. "Put these on and meet me on the training field. We're having a quirk apprehension test." A collective groan went through the class. "But what about the entrance ceremony? And the orientation?" Ochaco asked, voicing the confusion of many. "UA isn't a normal school," Aizawa stated, his gaze sweeping over them. Cold and dismissive. "You don't have time for pointless pleasantries. You're here to become heroes, and that starts now." The locker room was a cacophony of nervous chatter. Naruto changed quickly and silently. Observing. Bakugo was already posturing, declaring he'd get first place. Iida was lecturing everyone on proper procedure. Naruto simply leaned against a wall, waiting. He could feel the competitive energy in the room, the desperate need for validation. It was so different from the grim camaraderie of the shinobi world, where your comrade's strength was your own survival. Here, it seemed everyone was an island. On the field, Aizawa held up a device. You've been taking standardized tests your whole lives, but you've never been allowed to use your quirks. It's illogical. Today, we get a proper baseline. He turned to Bakugo. You got the highest score on the practical exam. What was your farthest softball throw in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa said, tossing him a ball. Bakugo grinned, a feral, vicious thing. He wound up, and with a thunderous explosion, launched the ball into the sky. Die, he screamed, an oddly chosen word for a simple throw. Aizawa showed them the result on his device. 705.2 meters. The class erupted in exclamations of awe. This looks fun. A pink-skinned girl cheered. Aizawa's expression soured. Fun? You think this is fun? The mood instantly plummeted. You have 3 years to become heroes. You think it's all going to be games and fun. The one who scores last in tot. All points will be judged to have no potential and will be expelled. Immediately, panic set in. This was a rational deception, Naruto realized. A way to push them to their absolute limits from day one. He had to respect the cold logic of it. The first test was the 50-meter dash. Naruto was paired against a boy with a bird head. As the starting gun fired, Naruto didn't bother with a flashy quirk display. He simply channeled a focused burst of vitality to his legs and exploded off the line. He crossed the finish in 3.04 seconds, a blur of motion that left his opponent staring at an empty track. It was fast, and humanly so, but subtle enough that most would attribute it to a simple enhancement-type quirk. Next, grip strength. While others used their quirks to augment their grip, Naruto simply took the device and squeezed. The machine whined, the digital numbers flying up past 500 kilograms before it made a sickening crunching sound and the screen went dead. He handed the broken device back to a stunned Aizawa. Sorry, he said, not sounding sorry at all. The long jump, he cleared the sandbox entirely. For side steps, he was a metronome of perfect, efficient motion, his score doubling the next best student. He performed each task with a detached, minimalist grace, never revealing more than he had to. He wasn't using jutsu or grand techniques, he was simply applying the absolute, perfect control he had over his own body and the energy within it. His performance was quietly terrifying. He wasn't loud like Bakugo or flashy like Shoto Todoroki, who used his ice to propel himself. He was just better. A quiet storm of competence that was beginning to unnerve his classmates. Finally, it was his turn for the ball throw. He stepped into the circle, the weighted ball feeling like a pebble in his hand. Let's see what the mystery man can do, someone whispered. Bakugo scoffed. He's probably just some boring strength quirk. No way he beats my score. Naruto ignored him. He didn't wind up. He didn't scream. He simply held the ball in his palm, cocked his arm back, and took a breath. He focused a pinpoint of his vitality, not into his muscles, but into the space just behind the ball. As he threw, he released it. It wasn't an explosion. It was a silent, concussive shove of pure energy. The ball vanished. There was no smoke trail, no sound of it breaking the sound barrier. It was just gone. A second later, Aizawa's device beeped incessantly. He stared at it, his perpetually bored eyes widening fractionally. He turned the screen to the class. It showed a single, impossible symbol, infinity. Infinity. The field went dead silent. What the hell was that? A red-haired kid named Kirishima stammered. Bakugo's face contorted with rage. What kind of trick was that? There's no way. He cheated. Naruto just shrugged and walked out of the circle. He hadn't thrown it into orbit. He'd simply pushed it with enough controlled force that it exited the school's sensor range before it could begin its descent. A simple application of principles he'd known his whole life. He caught Momo's eye. She wasn't looking at the scoreboard. She was looking at his hand, her brow furrowed, trying to dissect the physics of what she'd just witnessed. Ochaco was just staring at him, her mouth slightly agape, a look of pure, unadulterated awe on her face. Aizawa cleared his throat, regaining control. The expulsion was a logical deception. He announced, a wicked grin spreading across his face. A way to make you push past your limits. The class collectively sighed in relief, though most of them shot venomous looks at Momo, who had calmly deduced as much halfway through. However, Aizawa continued, his eyes lingering on Naruto for a second too long. The results speak for themselves. Know your limits, and then find a way to break them. Class is dismissed. As they walked back, Iida, Kirishima, and a few others crowded around Naruto, peppering him with questions. He gave vague, non-committal answers, his gaze distant. He wasn't being rude, he just didn't know how to explain a power that wasn't a quirk, not really. That was amazing, Uzumaki-kun, Ochaco said, catching up to him, her cheeks still flushed. Infinity. I've never seen anything like it. It was just a good throw, he said simply. It was an impossibility, Momo corrected, joining them on his other side. Her tone wasn't accusatory, but deeply curious. You generated a propulsive force without any visible kinetic or thermal release. It wasn't an explosion like Bakugo's, nor a telekinetic push. The energy signature was clean. What is the nature of your quirk? He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw a brilliant mind desperate for data, for understanding. It's complicated, he said. Hitch was the truest thing he could offer. Let's just call it energy manipulation for now. That seemed to satisfy her, at least for the moment. The three of them walked in a comfortable silence, an unlikely trio already forming in the wake of his impossible display. Naruto had come to UA to find a new way to live, but he was starting to realize he might have found something else, the first faint sparks of connection. The bus ride to the unforeseen simulation joint, or USJ, was noisy. Most of the class was excited, chattering about what kind of rescue training they would do. Naruto sat near the back again, watching the city blur by. So, Uzumaki, a frog-like girl named Suyu Asui said from the seat across from him, her bluntness a refreshing change. Your quirk seems a lot like All Might's. Just raw power. The comparison made Naruto's jaw tighten slightly. He remembered the feeling of All Might's power, that flickering torch. His was different. It was a sun. One was fading, the other was eternal. It's not, was all he said. Kirishima, sitting next to him, leaned in. Yeah, but it's super manly, man. You were awesome during the test. No flash, all power. I like it. Naruto gave a small, genuine smile at that. Kirishima's earnestness was reminiscent of some of his old comrades. Simple, strong, reliable. Ochaco, sitting a row ahead, turned around. I still can't get over what you did at the entrance exam. With the big robot, I never got to thank you properly. You saved me. You would have been fine, Naruto deflected. No, I wouldn't have, she said, her brown eyes serious. I was trapped. Thank you. He just nodded, unused to such direct gratitude without an undercurrent of politics or obligation. It was nice. Their arrival at the massive dome of the USJ cut the conversation short. They were greeted by the space hero, 13, who explained the facility was designed to simulate various disaster scenarios. As 13 was giving a speech about the dangers of their own quirks. The lights in the facility flickered and died. The central fountain sputtered. A tense silence fell. Then, in the center of the plaza below them, a swirling vortex of dark purple mist appeared. It writhed and expanded, and from its depths, people began to spill out. Dozens of them, villains. At the head of the group stood two figures. One was a man whose entire body seemed to be made of the same purple mist, save for two glowing yellow eyes. The other was a lanky man with pale blue hair, covered in dismembered hands that were gripped onto his arms, his neck, his face. Stay together, Aizawa commanded, his voice sharp and deadly serious. He pulled a pair of yellow goggles over his eyes. 13. Protect the students. This is real. The hand-covered man, Shigaraki, scratched his neck with a manic energy. We went to all this trouble to get here, and All Might isn't even home. Oh well, I wonder if he'll show up if we kill a few of his students. That was the trigger. Naruto's entire demeanor shifted. The quiet, detached teenager vanished, replaced by something cold, ancient, and terrifyingly competent. His senses flared, cataloging every threat. He counted over 70 low-level thugs. 3 or 4 with more dangerous-looking quirks, the mist man who was clearly a warp gate, and Shigaraki, who radiated an aura of decay and instability. And one more, a hulking, bird-faced monstrosity with an exposed brain standing silently behind them. The Nomu. The energy coming off that thing was wrong. A twisted amalgam of life forces, stitched together and screaming in silence. "Kurogiri," Shigaraki rasped. "Scatter them." Before Aizawa could fully engage, the mist man, Kurogiri, expanded, engulfing the students in a dome of dark energy. "It is a pleasure to meet you." His voice echoed from everywhere at once. "We are the League of Villains. And your part to play today is to be scattered and slaughtered." Naruto felt a disorienting pull, a sensation like being turned inside out. He instinctively flared his vitality, a protective shell that resisted the warp, but it was too strong. His last sight was of Ochaco and Momo right beside him, their faces masks of terror as the darkness swallowed them. Water. Cold and deep. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He was submerged. Above him, the dark dome of the USJ's flood zone simulation was visible. He wasn't alone. Aral shark-like villains with water-breathing quirks were circling, grinning with predatory glee. But Naruto's concern wasn't for himself. He twisted in the water, his senses searching. He felt 3 other life signatures nearby. Asui, the frog girl, was perfectly at home, clinging to the side of a large boat in the center of the zone. Good. But the other 2, Ochaco and Momo. They were in the water. Thrashing. Drowning. Time seemed to slow down. He saw one of the villains, a creature with fish-like features, swimming directly toward Momo, who was struggling to stay afloat, her uniform weighing her down. Naruto moved. Water was no obstacle to him. He'd trained for years in it. He shot through the depths like a torpedo, a golden streak. He intercepted the villain, his fist connecting with the creature's gut. The impact in the water was a concussive boom, sending a shockwave that blasted the villain backward, unconscious. He reached Momo just as her head was about to slip under. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her head above the surface. She gasped, coughing up water, her eyes wide with fear. "Uzumaki-kun, hold on," he said, his voice a low command. He spotted Ochaco not far off, struggling to stay afloat as another villain circled her. He couldn't be in 2 places at once. Not without help. He looked at Momo, who was shivering from cold and fear. "Yaoyorozu," he said, his voice sharp but not unkind. "I need you to focus. We are surrounded in the water. We need to get out of it, and we need an advantage. What can you create, right now, that achieves both?" He wasn't coddling her. He wasn't telling her the answer. He was giving her a mission, trusting her intellect as a weapon. Her eyes, filled with panic a moment ago, sharpened. The fear was replaced by intense concentration. She was a creator. She needed a problem to solve. An inflatable raft would get us out of the water, she stammered, thinking aloud. But it would be vulnerable. We need something solid, something with offensive capability. Her eyes lit up. "A paddle steamer. I can create a small one from my lipids. It would be fast, stable, and the paddle wheel itself could be used as a weapon against aquatic villains." "Good," Naruto said, a hint of approval in his voice. "Do it. I'll buy you time." He glanced over at Asui, who was watching them with wide, intelligent eyes. "Asui, keep Uraraka's head above water. I'll draw their fire. Call me Hiro," she replied, and with a powerful kick, she shot over to Ochaco, wrapping her long tongue around her waist and pulling her toward the central boat. With the girls relatively safe for the moment, Naruto turned his attention to the dozen or so villains closing in. A savage grin, one he hadn't worn in 17 years, touched his lips. "All right," he said to himself. "Let's play." He let go of Momo, who immediately began creating, a shimmering light emanating from her exposed arm as the frame of a small boat began to form. Naruto pushed off, a powerful kick sending him rocketing toward the enemy. They came at him from all sides, a swarm of teeth and claws. He didn't meet them with overwhelming force. He used their own environment against them. He dodged a lunging villain, grabbing him by the ankle and spinning, using the villain's body as a club to smash into 2 others. He channeled his vitality into the water, creating G-localized currents and whirlpools that disoriented his attackers, sending them spiraling into each other. He was a whirlwind of motion, precise and deadly. He wasn't killing them, but he was breaking bones, dislocating joints, and leaving a trail of unconscious bodies in his wake. Behind him, Momo let out a cry of triumph. A fully formed, 10-meter paddle boat, complete with a smoking chimney, now floated on the water. "It's ready, Sue," Get Uraraka on board, Naruto commanded. He dispatched the last conscious villain with a sharp chop to the neck and propelled himself out of the water, landing silently on the deck beside Momo. She was pale, her breathing heavy from the effort of her creation, but her eyes shone with a fierce pride he hadn't seen before. Asui got Ochaco onto the boat. Ochaco collapsed on the deck, shivering and nauseous from swallowing water. Thank you, she coughed. Don't thank me yet, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the central plaza. The real fight hasn't even started. He looked at Ochaco. The villains in the water were starting to recover. Uraraka, your quirk makes things weightless. Does it have to be a person or a single object? And no, she said, pushing herself up. Anything I touch with all 5 fingers. Good. Naruto pointed to the water, where debris from the initial attack, chunks of concrete and metal, floated. The villains are in the water. Your targets aren't the villains. Your targets are everything else. Think bigger. Understanding dawned on Ochaco's face. The nausea was replaced by a steely determination. She ran to the edge of the boat, slapping her hands on the surface of the water, then on the chunks of debris. One by one, massive pieces of concrete and twisted metal began to float into the air around their boat, dripping water. Now what? She asked, her breathing steadying. Now, Naruto said, a cold glint in his eye, you make it rain. With a cry of effort, Ochaco released her quirk on all the objects at once. A devastating barrage of heavy debris rained down on the villains in the water, creating a chaos of waves and impacts. It was brutal, effective, and entirely her own. She stared at her hands, a look of shock and newfound confidence on her face. See, Naruto said quietly, putting a hand on her shoulder. You're stronger than you think. From the edge of the plaza, they saw it. Aizawa was fighting, a whirlwind of cloth and fluid takedowns, his quirk erasing the powers of the villains he faced. But he was outnumbered, and then he made a mistake. He blinked. Shigaraki rushed him, his hand outstretched. Aizawa managed to pull back, but Shigaraki's fingers grazed his elbow. The skin and cloth decayed into dust. Then the Nomu moved. It was a blur, faster than anything Naruto had seen. It caught Aizawa, smashing his head into the concrete. Once, twice. The sound was sickening. Naruto's blood went cold. Momo, get this boat to shore. Now, get everyone out of the USJ and get help, he commanded. What about you? She asked, her voice trembling. Naruto was already at the edge of the boat, his eyes locked on the plaza. The playful glint was gone, replaced by the eyes of a veteran looking at a battlefield. I'm going to end this. Before they could protest, he was gone, a golden flash across the water. Naruto arrived at the central plaza just as the Nomu held a broken and bleeding Aizawa by the head. Shigaraki was monologuing, scratching his neck in delight. He's so cool, this Nomu, Shigaraki rasped. He's a bioengineered anti-symbol of peace. But you, Eraserhead, you're pretty cool, too. It's a shame your body is so fragile. Get your hands off him. The voice was low, cold, and heavy with a pressure that made Shigaraki flinch. He turned. Naruto stood 50 feet away, radiating an almost visible aura of condensed power. Oh, Shigaraki said, a tilt to his head. Another student came to die. Kurogiri materialized beside him. Tamura Shigaraki, be careful. This is the one who resisted my warp. His power is significant. Naruto didn't waste time with words. He vanished. He reappeared directly in front of Shigaraki, his fist aimed not at the villain, but at the Nomu's hand that held Aizawa. The Nomu, despite its speed, didn't have time to react. Naruto's punch connected. There was a meaty thud, and the Nomu stumbled back a step, but its hand was fine. Its grip on Aizawa didn't even loosen. Shock absorption, Naruto's mind supplied instantly. Just like Choji's human boulder. Physical impacts are useless. Shigaraki laughed. You see, you can't hurt him. He was made to kill All Might. The Nomu, recovering, swiped at Naruto. He dodged, the attack's wind pressure tearing up the ground where he'd been. He used the opening to grab Aizawa, pulling him free and leaping back. Placing his teacher gently on the ground near the stairs. The Nomu charged. Naruto met it head-on. The fight was a brutal ballet. Naruto was faster, more skilled. He landed a dozen blows for every one the Nomu attempted. He struck at joints, pressure points, and vital areas, but it was like punching a mountain of rubber. Nothing worked. The Nomu, in contrast, was a sledgehammer. It swung with wild, city-block leveling force. Naruto could only dodge, the impacts of its near misses shaking his bones. He was on the defensive, and he knew it. His base vitality, his physical prowess, it wasn't enough. Not against a creature designed to negate it. He needed something more, something that wasn't just physical. The Nomu landed a glancing blow on his side, sending him skidding across the concrete. He coughed, a sharp pain lancing through his ribs. He got to his feet, his eyes narrowed. It's a last resort, he thought, a bitter taste in his mouth. But Aizawa will die if I don't. The kids are still here. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. He reached deep inside himself, past the warm, steady sun of his own life force, to a place of shadow and rage. He found the core of Kurama's energy. A sealed star of malevolent, ancient power. He didn't open the floodgates. He just pricked it. He let a single, tiny sliver leak out and mix with his own vitality. The change was instantaneous. The air around him grew heavy, thick with an oppressive pressure that made the distant villains fall to their knees. His calm, golden aura ignited, now shot through with streaks of visceral, blood-red energy. His blue eyes bled into a fiery, slitted red. A low growl, more animal than human, escaped his lips. Shigaraki stopped scratching his neck. He stared, his eyes wide behind the hand on his face. What is that feeling? That power? It didn't feel like a quirk. It felt ancient, predatory, hungry. The Nomu, a mindless puppet, charged again. This time, Naruto didn't dodge. He met the charge. He raised his right hand, and the corrupted energy swirling around him converged on his palm. It didn't spin into a neat sphere. It writhed, a chaotic, screeching vortex of raw life force, a miniature star of red and gold. Churning and screaming like a tortured soul. A vitality sphere, corrupted and magnified 100-fold. Get out of my way, Naruto snarled. He thrust his hand forward, meeting the Nomu's massive chest. The moment of impact was silent. The sphere of energy didn't explode. It consumed. For a fraction of a second, the Nomu's bioengineered life force was drawn into the chaotic vortex. Devoured by the sliver of Kurama's insatiable hunger. Then, the sphere collapsed, and the physical force was released. Whoom. It was less an explosion and more a pure, directional release of force. The Nomu's entire torso was obliterated, not just punched, but disintegrated. The creature was launched backward, not as a body, but as a collection of broken limbs, crashing into the far wall of the USJ with enough force to crack the dome itself. It hit the wall and slid to the ground, a heap of mangled flesh, its vaunted regeneration failing to even start against an injury so absolute. Silence. Utter, terrified silence. Shigaraki was trembling, not in rage, but in something close to fear. He stared at the mangled Nomu, then back at Naruto, who stood with his hand still outstretched. Wisps of red and gold energy smoking from his palm. You cheated, Shigaraki whispered, his voice cracking. That's not how it's supposed to work. What are you? Before Naruto could answer, the main doors of the USJ were blown inward with a titanic crash. I am here. All Might stood in the doorway, his signature smile a grim line of fury. He wasn't smiling. He was enraged. But his arrival was a second too late. The main threat was already a broken pile of meat. His eyes took in the scene. The defeated villains, the broken Aizawa, the terrified Shigaraki, the destroyed Nomu, and the student standing at the center of it all, radiating an energy so potent and so malevolent that it made the symbol of peace's blood run cold. The red in Naruto's eyes faded, leaving him panting, the adrenaline leaving him shaky. He looked at his palm, at the lingering wisps of alien energy. He felt the echo of Kurama, not the companion he had known, but the demon of rage he had once been. He felt the weight of his past, a life of war and destruction he had tried so hard to leave behind. And for the first time since coming to this new, brighter world, Naruto Uzumaki felt a genuine, chilling stab of dread. He hadn't just used his power. He had unleashed a monster. And everyone had seen it. In the deepest, most secure ward of Tartarus prison, a man sustained by tubes and machines watched the events on a hidden monitor. All for One felt the spike of energy, that brief, ravenous flash. It was unlike any quirk he had ever encountered. It was not a power to be stolen. It felt like a power that stole. "Kurogiri," he said, his voice a distorted rasp through a speaker. "Retrieve Tamura. The game has changed. We have a new player on the board. Find out everything you can about that boy." Simultaneously, in her sterile office, Akane Surugame watched the live, high-resolution footage from a hidden HPSC camera in the USJ. She watched Naruto Uzumaki unleash a power that defied all their metrics. She watched him obliterate a creature designed to kill All Might. She didn't look intrigued. She looked grimly satisfied, as if her worst fears had been confirmed. Move his file from Engage to Priority 1 Containment, she said to her aide, her voice as cold as ice. Authorize all necessary assets. That boy is not a potential hero. He is an unregistered god of destruction. And he will be brought to heel. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Eye of the Storm. The aftermath of the USJ incident was a silent storm. While the media erupted with sensationalist headlines about the villain attack on UA, the real story was being told in hushed, classified briefings and whispered conversations in the halls of power. Naruto Uzumaki's name was on everyone's lips, a source of awe for his classmates, concern for his teachers, and outright alarm for the powers that be. He was questioned, of course. A long, grueling debrief with Nezu, a stone-faced detective named Tsukauchi, and a visibly strained All Might. Naruto gave them a heavily redacted version of the truth. His quirk, Vitality, allowed him to manipulate his life force. The red energy was a volatile, dangerous aspect of it, a self-destructive power he only used in the direst of circumstances. He claimed it caused severe internal damage, a lie to dissuade them from asking him to use it again. Tsukauchi's quirk, Human Lie Detector, was pinging like crazy. The detective knew Naruto was holding back massive amounts of information, but he also sensed that the core of his statements, that he acted to protect his friends and teacher, was unequivocally true. It left them in an impossible position. They had a student who had single-handedly defeated a weapon forged to kill the symbol of peace, and they had no idea what he truly was. His classmates treated him differently. The awe from the quirk test had been replaced by a mixture of fear and reverence. They kept their distance, speaking to him in quieter, more respectful tones. He was no longer just a talented peer, he was something other. A walking deterrent. The only ones who didn't change were Ochaco and Momo. They had been there, on that boat. They had seen his leadership, his calculated strategy, and his protective instinct before they saw the monster. Ochaco would find him during lunch, her presence a bubble of determined normalcy in the sea of nervous glances. "Are you okay, Uzumaki-kun?" she'd ask, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. "That power, it looked like it hurt you." Momo would approach with a different kind of support, offering him high evil study notes and analysis she'd prepared. "Your control over your base energy output is masterful," she told him one afternoon, her analytical mind a shield for her worry. "But that secondary release was chaotic, unrefined. If you intend to utilize it again, you must understand its mechanics to mitigate the physical backlash." It was her way of saying, be careful. Don't break yourself. Unwavering faith was a lifeline in his sudden isolation. They didn't see a monster. They saw a protector who had paid a heavy price. 2 weeks later, the announcement came. The UA Sports Festival would proceed as scheduled. Security would be tripled, but the school was adamant. They needed to show the world that they were not afraid, that the future of heroism was secure. For Naruto, it felt like a trap. He would be on a national stage, his every move scrutinized. The HPSC, All for One, the new League of Villains, they would all be watching. His first instinct was to throw the matches, to blend back into the crowd. But then he saw the looks on his classmates' faces. For them, this was everything. A chance to be scouted by pro-heroes, to take the first real step toward their dreams. He saw the fire in Ochaco's eyes as she talked about wanting to earn money to give her parents an easy life. He saw the quiet determination in Momo's as she trained, desperate to prove her worth after her hesitation at the USJ. He couldn't stand apart from that. He couldn't diminish their efforts by treating it as a joke. If he was going to participate, he would do it on his own terms. He wouldn't show off, but he wouldn't hold back so much that it was an insult. He would use it as a tool, a platform. Not for fame, but for a message. The day of the festival arrived, a massive, roaring spectacle. In the waiting room for Class 1A, the tension was thick. It was then that Shoto Todoroki, the silent prodigy with the ice and fire quirk, approached him. Uzumaki, Todoroki said, his voice flat and cold. Objectively, you are the strongest one here. Stronger even than All Might, from what I saw. The entire room went silent, listening. But I will beat you, Todoroki continued, his mismatched eyes burning with a cold fire. I have a reason I must prove myself, to reject my old man's ambition. I will do it by using only my mother's ice. I will win without ever using his power. Naruto looked at him, and he didn't see a rival. He saw a kid trapped in a cage of his own making, defined by a hatred for his father, Endeavor. He saw a reflection of himself, long ago, a boy defined by the demon sealed inside him. That's a stupid way to live, Naruto said simply, his words cutting through the tension. Todoroki's eyes widened in shock. What? Defining yourself by what you hate is just as much a prison as being controlled by it. Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying across the room. Winning with half your strength isn't a victory. It's a concession. You're still letting him live in your head, rent-free. He stood up, stretching. But do what you want. It's your power, isn't it? He walked out of the room, leaving a stunned Todoroki and a silent class in his wake. The first event was the obstacle race. A mad dash through a treacherous course. Naruto started at the back of the pack. As the race began, Todoroki instantly froze the ground, trapping dozens of students. But Naruto and a few others, including Bakugo and Momo, had anticipated it. Naruto didn't bother with the ice. He simply ran up the wall of the tunnel and over the trapped crowd. He navigated the course with a veteran's ease. At the first major obstacle, a field of giant robots from the entrance exam, Todoroki froze them in a brittle, unstable state. As other students tried to navigate the precarious structures, Naruto just ran past them. A zero-pointer lunged, and he didn't even break stride. He leapt onto its arm, ran up its body, and used its head as a launching pad to clear the entire field, landing gracefully on the other side. The final obstacle was a minefield. Bakugo was flying over it with his explosions. Todoroki was creating a path of ice. Naruto, however, simply walked through it. His senses, honed by years of detecting hidden traps and paper bombs, allowed him to feel the subtle pressure differences in the ground. He stepped on the exact spots where the mines weren't, weaving a path through the explosions with a calm that was more unnerving than any display of power. He crossed the finish line first, without a scratch on him, having expended almost no energy. He had dominated, but he had done it quietly, efficiently. It was a statement. I don't need to try hard to be better than you. During the break before the next event, he felt a strange, bubbly energy approaching. He turned to see a girl with long, periwinkle hair and wide, curious eyes floating toward him. She was one of the Big Three, the top students of UA. Nejire Hato. Hey, you're Uzumaki, right? She said. Our voice a rapid-fire burst of enthusiasm. She floated in a slow circle around him, her head tilted. I saw your fight at the USJ. On the internal feeds. That red and gold energy, what was that? It wasn't like a normal quirk. It felt so dense and hot. But your normal energy, the one you're using now, it's warm and bright, but it feels deep. Like the ocean. Why the difference? Is it two quirks? How do you control the output? Does it have a physical toll? Why don't you talk more? You look kinda lonely. Are you lonely? Naruto was taken aback by the barrage. Her questions weren't accusatory or fearful. They were born of a boundless, almost scientific curiosity. And she wasn't just guessing. She was feeling his power in a way no one else had. She was sensing the difference between his own vitality and the sliver of Kurama's chakra. He found himself giving a small, wry smile. You ask a lot of questions. Because there are a lot of answers I want. She chirped. You're the most interesting thing to happen to UA in years. So, are you going to answer? Maybe later, he said, turning to walk away. If you can keep up. Her laughter, bright and clear, followed him. Challenge accepted. The second event, the cavalry battle, forced him into the spotlight. As the first place winner, he was worth 10 million points, making him the target for every other team. No one wanted to team up with him, afraid of the attention. "I'll be on your team, Uzumaki-kun," Ochaco declared, running up to him, her face set with determination. Before he could respond, Momo stepped forward as well. His defensive capabilities are unparalleled, but he will need strategic support and equipment. "I can provide that. I will join you as well." He looked at them, one offering unwavering loyalty, the other tactical genius. He nodded. "All right, but we need one more. Someone fast, for evasion." He scanned the crowd. His eyes landed on the bird-headed boy from the quirk test, Fumikage Tokiyami. His quirk, Dark Shadow, was fast, versatile, and powerful in the shadows cast by the stadium. "Tokiyami," Naruto called out. "You want to win." Tokiyami, a creature of few words, simply nodded. "The greatest darkness lies in the eye of the storm." "Good," Naruto said. "Here's the plan." Their team was an impenetrable fortress. Naruto, as the rider, didn't even need to give orders. He simply acted as the unbreakable center. Momo, in the front, created insulated shields, smoke bombs, and grappling hooks on the fly. Ochaco, on the side, made them and their gear momentarily weightless for bursts of incredible speed and impossible dodges. Tokiyami's Dark Shadow acted as their primary offense and defense, a sentient weapon that struck from the shadows. They didn't run. They held their ground in the center of the arena. Teams came at them in waves, and they were systematically dismantled. Bakugo's team charged, and Momo created a thick, non-flammable foam that smothered his explosions while Dark Shadow snatched his headband. Todoroki's team attacked with a massive glacier, but Naruto simply placed a hand on it. The ice didn't melt, it simply stopped, the kinetic force of its creation completely nullified. He then tapped the ground, sending a precise shockwave that cracked Todoroki's ice platform, forcing them to retreat. They ended the round with their 10 million points intact, having also collected the headbands of the other top two teams. It was a display of absolute, strategic dominance. Naruto had barely moved, but his team had conquered the field. He had shown them something more important than raw power, synergy. The final event was the one-on-one tournament. Naruto's first match was against a boy from Class 1B with a vine manipulation quirk. The match lasted 4 seconds. The boy sent a wave of vines at him. Naruto vanished and appeared behind him, a single finger lightly tapping the back of his neck. The boy collapsed, unconscious. His path led him, inevitably, to Shoto Todoroki. The stadium was buzzing. The son of Endeavor versus the monster of the USJ. Fire and ice versus the unknowable. They faced each other on the concrete stage. Endeavor was in the stands, his arms crossed, a furious look on his face. "Shoto, show them why you are my masterpiece," he bellowed. Todoroki ignored him, his gaze fixed on Naruto. "I will win," he said, his voice low. "And I will do it without his help." "The match begins." Present Mike screamed. Todoroki unleashed a tidal wave of ice, a glacier meant to end the fight instantly. It was far more powerful than anything he had used before. The crowd gasped at the sheer scale of it. Naruto didn't move, he just stood there as the mountain of ice rushed toward him. At the last second, he held up a single hand. He didn't use Kurama's chakra. He just used his own vitality, a pure, concentrated burst of it. Crack. The sound was like the world breaking. A spiderweb of fractures appeared on the face of the glacier. Then, with a deafening roar, the entire mountain of ice exploded outward into a billion glittering shards. The concussive force of the blast knocked the wind out of the front rows of the stadium. Naruto stood in the center of the now empty stage, unharmed, his hands still raised. Todoroki stared, his mind reeling. His ultimate attack, his strongest move, had been shattered by a hand gesture. "Is that all?" Naruto asked, his voice calm, but carrying a sharp edge of disappointment. "You're going to beat me with that? You're going to prove something with a power you're hamstringing out of spite?" He started walking forward. Todoroki sent another wave of ice, then another. Naruto walked through them, shattering them with casual, single-handed blows. The stage became a field of broken ice. "He's nothing to you." Naruto's voice rose. echoing in the shocked silence of the stadium. This power you have, it isn't his. He may have given you the raw ingredients, but you're the one who cooked the meal. It's yours. Your power, isn't it? The words, so similar to the ones he'd once shouted at a different boy in a different valley, struck Todoroki like a physical blow. He stumbled back, memories of his mother, of the boiling water, of his father's cruel training, flashing in his eyes. Shut up, Todoroki hissed, sending jagged pillars of ice erupting from the ground. Naruto moved, weaving between them. No, you're a hero, aren't you? You want to save people. How can you save anyone if you won't even save yourself? Stop being a prisoner of your own blood. He was in front of Todoroki now. He pulled back a fist, not glowing with red energy, but with the pure, golden light of his own vitality. Show me your power, Shoto Todoroki. All of it. Todoroki looked at the incoming fist, at the unwavering conviction in Naruto's eyes. And something inside him broke. A lifetime of self-imposed chains shattered. Instinct, survival, and a desperate, buried desire to be whole took over. A torrent of brilliant, roaring flame erupted from his left side. The fire met Naruto's fist. The explosion was immense, a mushroom cloud of steam and fire that engulfed the stage and rose high into the sky. The heat was so intense that the stadium's sprinklers activated. When the smoke cleared, Todoroki was on his knees, panting, his left side steaming. He had been thrown to the very edge of the stage, barely conscious. Naruto stood in the center. His shirt shredded, minor burns on his arm, but otherwise unharmed. He had taken the full, unrestrained force of Todoroki's fire and hadn't moved an inch. He had broken E-Boy's mental shackles through overwhelming force. He hadn't just defeated an opponent, he had liberated a rival. Todoroki is out of bounds. Midnight, the referee declared. The winner is Naruto Uzumaki. The stadium was silent for a moment, then erupted into a deafening roar. They had witnessed something profound, something more than a fight. Later that day, after winning his final match NST Bakugo in a similarly anticlimactic fashion, he simply caught Bakugo's fist mid-explosion and held it until the boy passed out from the strain of his own quirk. Naruto stood on the podium. He accepted his gold medal with a simple nod. His expression unreadable. He had won. He had proven his point. But he knew this victory came at a cost. He had put himself squarely in the eye of a hurricane. As the ceremony concluded, he saw a black car parked near the exit. A woman in a sharp business suit stood beside it, her posture rigid. She met his gaze across the field, her expression cold and appraising. A handler from the Hero Public Safety Commission. He knew it instantly. He ignored her. He was about to leave when he was approached by a pro-hero, a man with the head of a dog. Uzumaki. I am Hound Dog. I run a small, independent agency focused on tracking and investigation. Your sensory abilities are off the charts. I'd like to offer you an internship. Before he could answer, another hero, a tall, imposing woman in a samurai-like costume, stepped forward. His combat prowess is what matters. He should intern with me, and learn the way of the warrior. He was being scouted, but the offers felt hollow. They saw a tool, a skill set. He was about to politely decline all of them when a government-issue black sedan pulled up. The back window rolled down, and the severe face of Director Akane Tsurugame looked out at him. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. The Hero Public Safety Commission has been most impressed with your performance. We would like to formally offer you a provisional hero license, effective immediately. You would be assigned to a special operations unit under our direct command. An honor reserved for the most promising candidates. The air grew cold. This wasn't an offer. It was a summons, a demand for fealty. They wanted to put a leash on him, to turn him into their weapon. Naruto looked at the director, at the waiting agent, the pro-heroes all vying for a piece of him. He thought of his quiet apartment, of the simple life he had tried to build. That life was gone forever. He could either be a pawn for others, or he could be his own king. He gave Director Tsurugame a calm, steady look. No, thank you, he said, his voice clear and firm enough for all the nearby heroes to hear. A hero who can only move on a leash isn't a hero. He's a weapon, and I'm done being a weapon. He turned his back on her, on the HPSC, on all of them, and started to walk away. The director's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. She had offered him the gilded cage. And he had spat on it in public. This was no longer about containment. It was about control. As Naruto walked toward the stadium exit, he felt three distinct presences. One was the HPSC agent, a shadow detaching from the wall, beginning to follow him. The second was a colder, emptier feeling from a distant rooftop, a herald of the void, drawn by the massive display of power, marking him as a prime offering. The third was a light, bubbly energy that floated down from the sky. Nejire Hato landed softly a few feet in front of him, blocking his path. She wasn't asking a million questions this time. She was just watching him, her head tilted, a curious, unreadable smile on her face. She had seen his fights, heard his defiance to Todoroki, and witnessed his public rejection of the commission. The puzzle of Naruto Uzumaki had just become infinitely more complex, and infinitely more interesting. He stood on the pavement, the setting sun casting long shadows. An enemy in front of him, an enemy behind him, and a system determined to break him. He should have been worried. But for the first time, looking at the curious girl in front of him, and thinking of the TWO back in the stands who believed in him without question, he didn't feel entirely alone in the eye of the storm. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Shadow of the Void. The week following the sports festival was a tense and surreal affair. Naruto's public refusal of the HPSC's offer had sent ripples through the hero world. He was the talk of the nation, a prodigy of unprecedented power who had defied the very institution that governed heroes. To some, he was an arrogant child. To others, a symbol of necessary rebellion. To Naruto, it was just the truth. The immediate consequence was a suffocating, low-level surveillance. He could feel the eyes on him constantly. The HPSC agent, a woman with a chameleon-like quirk that made her blend into crowds, was a persistent shadow. He never acknowledged her, but he always knew she was there. A testament to the commission's silent warning. The internship selections were a minefield. The top-tier heroes, those with close ties to the HPSC, had conspicuously withdrawn their offers. The remaining offers were from smaller, independent agencies who were either brave or foolish enough to associate with him. He sat in the classroom, staring at the list, feeling a familiar sense of being cornered. He needed information. The strange energy he'd felt from the Nomu, the predatory hunger of it, gnawed at him. It was a thread, and he needed to pull it. That required intelligence, not brawling. There was only one hero on the list renowned for his mind above all else. "I'll be interning with Sir Night-Eye," Naruto announced, his choice surprising everyone, including Aizawa. Sir Night-Eye, All Might's former sidekick, was infamous for his rigid personality and his powerful foresight quirk. He was also known for running one of the most effective intelligence ND investigation agencies in the country. It was a logical choice, but a dangerous one. Night-Eye was a system man, a true believer in the structures Naruto had just publicly rejected. A bold choice, Uzumaki, Aizawa grunted. A flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Night-Eye values results and procedure above all else. Don't disappoint him. Meanwhile, Ochaco and Momo made their own choices. Ochaco, buoyed by her performance in the festival, accepted an offer from the combat-oriented hero Gunhead, determined to round out her skills and turn her quirk into a weapon, just as Naruto had shown her she could. Momo, seeking to build her confidence and rapid decision-making, chose to intern with the snake hero Uebami, whose agency was known for its high-pressure media and rescue operations in densely populated areas. Nejire, already part of the Big Three, didn't need an internship in the same way. She was already working on high-level cases with her mentor, Yukio, the Dragoon hero. But her interest in Naruto hadn't waned. She'd, coincidentally, pop up wherever he was on campus, firing off questions about his training, his control, his past. "So why Night-Eye?" she asked, floating upside down in front of him as he walked home. "He's so stiff and serious. Don't you think he'll try to box you in? Aren't you the guy who hates leashes?" "The best way to understand a system is from the inside," Naruto replied. Not breaking his stride. "And he has resources I need." "Resources for what?" she pressed, her curiosity a tangible force. "You're looking for something, aren't you?" "Ever since the USJ I can feel it. It's like a low hum under your skin. A question you need to answer. He stopped and looked at her. Her perception was unsettling, but it wasn't hostile. It was genuine. Something's coming, he said. His voice low. Something worse than the League of Villains. I felt it. Nejire's playful expression sobered instantly. She righted herself, her feet touching the ground. Worse than the thing you did that too. He just nodded. The shared knowledge of that moment hung between them. It was a bond forged in seeing something no one was ever meant to see. Sir Night Eye's agency was a sterile, hyper-organized office in a sleek downtown skyscraper. The man himself was even more imposing in person, tall and gaunt, his sharp suit immaculate and his glasses glinting. He looked Naruto up and down, his expression one of deep disapproval. Naruto Uzumaki, Night Eye said, his voice crisp. The prodigy who thinks he is above the system that allows him to exist. You are powerful, I will grant you that. But you are also reckless, arrogant, and a potential liability of catastrophic proportions. Naruto didn't flinch. I'm here to learn, he said, his tone even. You are here because I wish to observe you. Night Eye corrected, activating his quirk. His eyes glowed. He looked at Naruto, and his face went pale. His usual process was to see a person's future, their entire life path laid out like a film strip. When he looked at Naruto, he saw nothing. A blinding, golden light, a formless, churning void, and then flashes of a world that wasn't this one, a village hidden in leaves, a great stone face. A nine-tailed fox of pure rage. It was a chaotic storm of temporal and dimensional feedback that gave him an instant, splitting headache. He stumbled back, clutching his head. What are you? Night Eye gasped, his composure shattered for the first time in years. Complicated, Naruto said, the same answer he'd given Momo. He hadn't expected the foresight coup. Irked to react so violently to his reincarnated soul. You wanted to observe me. Now you know there's something worth observing. I want access to your files on the USJ incident. Specifically, everything you have on the creature they called Nomu. Its biological makeup, its energy signature, anything. Night Eye, still shaken, stared at him. He saw now that this wasn't an arrogant child. This was Samet, Hing ancient and powerful wearing a child's face. And it was deeply, deeply troubled by the Nomu. The professional in him took over. Why? Because there will be more of them, Naruto said. And the energy that made it, it's a cancer. If we don't find the source, it will spread. The internship began not with patrols or hero work, but with Naruto buried in a data room, sifting through every piece of intelligence Night Eye's agency had gathered. The work was tedious, but he was relentless. He found it on the third day, a spectral analysis of the energy radiating from the Nomu's corpse. It was a chaotic mess. A dozen different quirk factors mashed together. But underneath it all, there was another signature. A flat, dead energy. A signature of pure anti-life. It wasn't a power source, it was a power drain. As Naruto stared at the screen, his phone buzzed. It was an emergency alert from a custom app Momo had designed for a few of them after the USJ. A single, pulsing red dot. Ochaco. He was moving before he even processed it. I have to go, he told a surprised Night Eye. Your internship duties are here. My friend is in trouble. Naruto cut him off, his eyes hard. That's my duty. He vanished from the room, leaving a stunned Sir Night Eye staring at the empty space. Across the city, the world had gone gray. Ochaco and Gunhead had been responding to a routine call, a villain with a minor gigantification quirk causing a disturbance in a shopping district. But as they arrived, something strange happened. A low hum filled the air. A wave of invisible energy washed over the area, and suddenly, quirks began to flicker and fail. Gunhead, trying to use his Gatling quirk, found only useless, fleshy nozzles sprouting from his arms. The giant villain shrank back to his normal size, looking confused and terrified. Then they appeared. 3 figures in dark, hooded cloaks, emerging from the panicked crowds. They moved with an unnatural grace, their faces hidden in shadow. The harvest begins, one of them said, his voice a dry whisper. They carried strange, metallic devices, rods that pulsed with a sickening gray light. As they activated them, the draining effect intensified. Civilians collapsed, not dead, but suddenly weak, pale, their life force being siphoned away. The very color seemed to leach from the streets, the bright storefronts fading to a dull monochrome. Ochaco felt it too. She tried to make a piece of rubble float, and her stomach lurched violently. The quirk sputtered, barely lifting the object an inch before it fell with a thud. Her power was being suppressed, leached away. Fall back. Get the civilians out. Gunhead yelled, shifting to hand combat. He was a skilled fighter, but the heralds, as they called themselves, were more than just thugs. Their movements were precise, and they wielded powers that seemed to be the antithesis of quirks. One of them touched Gunhead's arm, and the hero screamed, his muscles seizing as his own bio-energy was drained away. Ochaco was alone, her greatest weapon useless, in a sea of encroaching dread. She did the only thing she could. She sent the distress signal. Minutes later, a similar scene was playing out in the high-end commercial district where Momo was interning. She and Uwabami were at a promotional event when the gray wave hit. Uwabami's hair snakes went limp. Momo tried to create a simple E-staff and felt a wave of nausea so intense she almost passed out. A second herald was there, a tall, slender figure who moved with serpentine grace, their energy-draining rod turning the vibrant plaza into a lifeless tableau. The heralds weren't causing destruction. They were causing entropy. They were turning off the world. Naruto arrived at Ochaco's location like a thunderbolt. He landed in the center of the street, the gray, life-draining energy washing over him. He felt it, a chilling leeching sensation, but the sun of his own vitality was too vast, too powerful. It was like trying to drain the ocean with a teacup. The gray energy hissed and recoiled from him, unable to get a purchase. He was a beacon of brilliant, warm color in a world of gray. Uzumaki-kun, Ochaco cried out, relief flooding her face. The lead herald turned, his hidden face fixing on Naruto. "You," the herald whispered, a flicker of something like excitement in his voice. "The great offering. You have come to us." "Get away from her," Naruto said, his voice a low growl. He created a dozen clones in an instant. They weren't for fighting. They fanned out, grabbing stunned civilians, carrying them out of the draining field. Their own vitality acting as a temporary shield. The herald lunged, not at Naruto, but at Gunhead. Naruto moved to intercept, but two other, lesser cultists appeared, blocking his path. He dispatched them with brutal, efficient blows, but the delay was enough. The herald's hand closed around Gunhead's head. Suddenly, a massive blast of spiraling energy shot down from the sky, forcing the herald to leap back. Nejire Hado descended, her hands glowing, her face a mask of fury. "I got your alert," she called out, landing beside Naruto. Momo sent one, two. "It's happening all over the city. They're draining quirks," Naruto said, his eyes scanning the chaos. "No, not just quirks. Life force. They're feeding on it." As if on cue, a sleek, black hovercraft of Momo's design, Clearl. Why something she'd made before the field was fully active, screamed around the corner. Momo was at the helm, her face pale but resolute. Their devices create a field that inhibits quirk factor expression. It also seems to have a bio-draining effect. "I created these before my quirk failed completely." She tossed them several objects. Small, silver discs. Personal energy capacitors. They should provide a buffer against the drain. At least for a while. Ochaco, Naruto, and Nejire slapped the devices onto their chests. The sickening, draining feeling lessened, though it didn't vanish completely. The four of them stood together in the gray street, a bastion against the encroaching silence. The herald watched them, unconcerned. More moths to the flame. It matters not. The ritual is already underway. The rods they carried began to glow brighter, and the stolen energy streamed from them, converging on a point high in the sky, invisible to the naked eye. They're not just attacking, Naruto realized, his tactical mind piecing it together. This is a ritual. They're gathering power for something. So we smash them and break their toys. Nejire said, her hands glowing. It's not that simple, Momo countered, her mind racing. The draining effect is centered on those rods. We need to disable them simultaneously. A coordinated strike. Okay, Naruto said, taking command instantly. Here's the plan. Nejire, you're our heavy artillery. You can fly above the main field effect. I need you to draw the lead herald's fire and provide cover. Momo, Your quirk is still weak, but your mind isn't. You're our strategist. Find the weak points on those devices. Ochaco, you and I are ground support. Your quirk is weakened, but not gone. We're going to use that. He looked at Ochaco, whose face was still tight with fear and the lingering nausea. Your job isn't to fight him. It's to control the battlefield. Forget lifting heavy things. Lift small things. Gravel, debris, dust, anything you can touch. Make the ground beneath his feet a trap. His faith in her, his immediate understanding of how she could adapt, was a spark in the darkness. Her expression hardened with resolve. Got it. The battle began. Nejire shot into the air, raining down powerful energy blasts. The herald moved with impossible speed, a blur of black cloth, dodging her attacks while trying to land a draining touch on the downed heroes. Below, Naruto engaged the other cultists, his movements a blur of orange and black. He was a physical powerhouse, his fists and feet striking with the force of pistons. Ochaco, meanwhile, moved low to the ground. She slapped her hands on the pavement, her quirk sputtering but catching hold. She didn't lift the street, she just made the top layer of asphalt, gravel, and dirt weightless. The herald, landing from a leap, found the ground beneath his feet shifting like liquid. His balance, for a fraction of a second, was broken. Now, Momo yelled from the hovercraft, pointing to a crystalline focusing lens on the side of the herald's rod. The lens. It's the regulator. It was the opening Naruto needed. He surged forward, ignoring the lesser cultists. The herald, still off balance, tried to bring the rod to bear. But Naruto was too fast. He didn't strike the rod. He didn't strike the herald. His hand, glowing with a gentle golden light, slapped over the lens. He didn't try to destroy it. He poured his own vitality into it. The device was designed to drain energy. It was a one-way street. Naruto was force-feeding it, overloading its capacity with a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated life force. The rod whined, the crystal cracking. The gray light sputtered and died. The oppressive, life-draining field collapsed in an instant. Color flooded back into the world. The hum vanished. Quirks flared back to life. Gunhead, gasping, sat up. Civilians began to stir. The herald stared at his broken rod, then at Naruto, his hidden eyes wide with disbelief. You fed it. You fed the void. Impossible. He knew he was outmatched. With a final, hateful glare, he threw a smoke bomb to the ground. By the time the smoke cleared, he was gone. The battle was over, but the city was in chaos. Reports were flooding in. Similar attacks had happened in 3 other locations, each led by a herald. Pro-heroes had been overwhelmed. The heralds had gathered a massive amount of energy before being driven off or escaping. As the police and paramedics arrived, Naruto stood with Ochaco, Momo, and Nejire. They were exhausted, battered, but they were together. Their synergy had been flawless. Momo's intellect, Ochaco's environmental control, Nejire's overwhelming power, and Naruto's unbreakable core. They had worked as a single unit. The vulnerability of the moment was a catalyst. Nejire, her usual bubbly energy replaced by a quiet respect, simply bumped his shoulder with her own. You were right. Something bad is coming. Ochaco, looking at the recovering civilians, her face smudged with dirt, felt a new sense of purpose. She had been more than just support. She had been a key part of the strategy. He had shown her how. Momo looked at the broken herald device, her mind already dissecting its properties, formulating countermeasures. He had trusted her mind when her power failed, and it had been enough. But Naruto's attention was elsewhere. He looked at a nearby hospital. During the fight, when the draining field was at its peak, he had felt the life signs inside flicker and dim. The backup generators, powered by quirk-based technology, had faltered. The life support systems were failing. He had faced a choice: stop the herald, or save the people in that hospital. He couldn't be in 2 places at once. He had made his choice. He'd prioritized stopping the ritual. But the cost? He didn't know it yet. He hoped the buffer from Momo's device had been enough to keep the systems online. He hoped the field hadn't lasted long enough to cause irreversible damage. Suddenly, Sir Night-Eye was there. His face grim. He had followed Naruto. He had seen everything. The HPSC is already spinning this, Night-Eye said, his voice low and urgent. They're framing your unsanctioned response as interference. Claiming your presence escalated the situation. We saved people, Ochaco said, her voice trembling with anger. You won the battle, Nejire corrected, his gaze fixed on Naruto. But you may have just given your enemies the ammunition to start a war against you. He then looked toward the hospital, and a flicker of his foresight seemed to activate, his eyes glazing over for a second. His face went ashen. Oh no, he pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. He was accessing hospital status reports. Uzumaki. The energy drain. It caused a cascading failure in the city's power grid. Hosu General's primary and secondary life support systems went down for 94 seconds. Naruto's blood ran cold. He had felt it. He had known. He had used his clones for civilian evac, but he hadn't had enough time or focus to send one to the hospital, to form the energy grid he instinctively knew he could create. He had chosen the Herald. How many? Naruto asked, his voice barely a whisper. Nejire looked up from his phone, his face a mask of grim duty. 13 critical patients. They're gone. The world seemed to tilt. 13 people, dead, not because of a villain's punch or an explosion, but because he had made a choice. He had stopped the Herald, but he hadn't saved them. The weight of that reality, the cold calculus of command, crashed down on him with a force greater than any physical blow. Sir Nejire looked at him, and for the first time, he didn't see a liability or a weapon. He saw a commander who had just faced the unwinnable scenario and was now confronting the cost. His foresight had shown him a glimpse of this. A glimpse of Naruto fighting a formless darkness that threatened to swallow the world. He understood that the path to that battle was paved with choices like this. The Commission will crucify you for this, Nejire said softly. They will say your reckless vigilantism led to this. They will bury you. He paused, making a decision. But they are wrong. You were the only one who could have stopped that ritual. I don't know what it was for, but I know it would have been worse. I saw a flicker of it. He closed his phone and looked Naruto in the eye. My agency is now at your disposal. Clandestinely. The world needs a hero who can fight the battles in the shadows. And you need an intelligence network that isn't afraid of the dark. We will find the source of this rot. Together. It was an offer of alliance. A recognition of a greater war. But it was no comfort. Naruto looked at his hands. The hands that had defeated gods and monsters, the hands that had just failed to save 13 innocent lives. He was back in it. The impossible choices. The devastating consequences. The quiet life was a ghost. A forgotten dream. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Unsanctioned Hero. The backlash was immediate and brutal. The HPSC didn't just leak a story, they orchestrated a symphony of condemnation. Within hours, every major news network was running the same narrative, a masterclass in political assassination. Unregistered UA, students' interference in villain attack, a heroic actor reckless endangerment. One headline blared. The reports were filled with carefully edited footage. They showed Naruto arriving on the scene, a lone figure of immense power. They showed the escalation of the fight. The Herald's desperate moves, the collapsing infrastructure. They showed the frantic scenes outside Hosu General Hospital. They showed everything except the life-draining field and the helplessness of the pro-heroes. They framed the power grid failure not as a direct result of the villains' technology, but as a consequence of the chaotic battle Naruto had provoked. Anonymous, Ishin sources, spoke of a rogue student with an unstable quirk, operating outside the chain of command. They painted a picture of a ticking time bomb, a boy whose power was too great for his own judgment. The 13 deaths at the hospital were not laid at the feet of the mysterious heralds of the void, but were subtly, insidiously, tied to Naruto's unsanctioned intervention. The morning after the attack, Naruto was summoned to Principal Nezu's office. Aizawa was there, as was a grim-faced All Might in his skeletal form. A formal letter from the HPSC rested on the desk. They're demanding your immediate suspension from UA, Nezu said, his usual cheerfulness absent, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. Pending a full investigation into your conduct and a mandatory psychological and quirk evaluation by their own doctors. They're citing public safety regulations and the Special Measures Act. It's a witch hunt. Aizawa growled, his fists clenched. They couldn't control him, so now they're trying to cage him. All Might coughed, a pained, wheezing sound. Young Uzumaki. I have spoken to my contacts. Director Surugame is leveraging this. She's using the tragedy to consolidate power and make an example of you. They want to force you into their custody. Naruto stood silent, listening. He wasn't angry. He wasn't scared. He was just tired. He'd played this game before. In a world of spies and political maneuvering. He knew exactly what this was. What do you want me to do? Naruto asked Nezu, his voice flat. Nezu's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. Officially, my hands are tied. I must comply with the Commission's directive. You are suspended from all Hero Course activities, effective immediately. You are not to leave campus grounds without an authorized escort. He paused, taking a sip of his tea. Unofficially, a suspension is not an expulsion. A cage has bars, but bars have gaps. The Commission wants you isolated. They want you to be alone. Do not let them have what they want. The message was clear. Nezu would handle the official battle. Naruto's fight was to survive the isolation. The suspension hit Class 1A like a physical blow. When Aizawa announced it, a shocked silence fell over the room. Naruto wasn't there. He'd been confined to his small, dorm-like room on campus, a gilded cage. But that's insane. Kirishima burst out, slamming a fist on his desk. He saved us. He saved Gunhead Sensei. You were there, Uraraka. Ochaco shot to her feet, her face a mask of furious tears. They're lying. All of it. There was this gray energy. It was draining everyone. None of our quirks worked. Naruto was the only one who could even move. He fought them off. He saved us. Her passionate defense was met with a mixture of support and confusion. Some, like Kirishima and Tokiyami, who had witnessed his power firsthand, believed her without question. Others, however, were swayed by the media blitz. But the hospital, a student with large lips mumbled. 13 people. The news said the fight caused the power surge. The news is lying. Bakugo, of all people, roared, slamming his feet off his desk. He stood up, his eyes burning with a competitive rage that had been twisted into a strange form of defense. That damn nerd is an arrogant bastard, but he's not a killer. And he's stronger than any of those small fry villains. He wouldn't need a chaotic fight. He could have ended it in a second. If people died, it's because those second-rate pros couldn't handle it before he got there. Don't you dare lump him in with villains. Bakugo's outburst, a declaration that Naruto was his rival to defeat and not some common criminal, ironically did more to sway the undecided than anything else. The class was divided, but the seeds of dissent against the official narrative had been planted. Naruto's isolation was a pressure cooker. He was confined to a single room, meals delivered to his door. His only contact was with his designated HPSC, Minder. The same chameleon agent from the sports festival. She never spoke, just watched from a distance, a constant, silent reminder of his status as a prisoner. He didn't rage. He didn't despair. He trained. His room was small, but it was enough. He did thousands of push-ups, sit-ups, and handstands. He practiced his control, forming and dispelling minuscule clones, each one perfectly silent, a testament to his precision. He meditated, delving deep into his own life force, feeling the echo of Kurama, not as a weapon, but as a part of him, a memory of a bond he cherished. He was centering himself, preparing for the storm he knew was coming. He wasn't entirely alone. At night, a small, intricate drone, clearly of Momo's design, would fly to his window. A holographic display would flicker to life, showing Momo's face. The legal team is working on it, she reported on the third night, her expression strained but determined. My family has retained the best quirk law specialists in the country. They're filing injunctions, demanding access to the unedited footage from the incident, citing procedural violations by the HPSC. We're building a case. Her family's immense wealth and influence were being wielded like a broadsword against the Commission's political machine. She wasn't just offering support, she was waging a private war on his behalf. Thank you, Yaoyorozu, he said, his voice quiet. You don't have to do this. Yes, she replied, her eyes meeting his through the hologram. I do. They are questioning your character, and I have been a direct witness to it. 2. Remain silent would be a disservice to the truth. And to you. Another night, it was Ochaco. She used her quirk to float a small, secured tablet up to his window. When he opened it, her face, full of fiery indignation, appeared. It's not just you they're silencing, she said, her voice a fierce whisper. Gunhead Sensei tried to give a statement corroborating my story, and the commission slapped a gag order on him. Citing the ongoing investigation, people in the other classes are starting to believe the news. They're calling you a vigilante, a monster. It's not fair. She had become his fiercest defender, arguing with other students, presenting her first-hand account to anyone who would listen. She was fighting a grassroots battle for his reputation, armed with nothing but the truth and her own unwavering belief in him. Ochaco, he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. It's okay. Let them talk. No, it's not okay, she insisted. A hero's most important asset is the people's trust. They're trying to steal that from you before you even have a chance to earn it. Even Nejire found a way through. She couldn't get to his window, but her messages came via Sir Night-Eye's encrypted network. They were a bizarre mix of bubbly encouragement and sharp-eyed intelligence. Yukio is furious. The HPSC is trying to sideline all the heroes who were on scene. They're burying the truth about the heralds. P.S. I tried the ramen place you like. The pork was amazing. P.P.S. We analyzed the energy signature from the herald staff. It's a perfect negative of a quirk factor. It doesn't erase it, it inverts it. Like matter and antimatter. So weird, and cool, and scary. Anyway, hang in there. Her messages were a chaotic, welcome reminder that there was a bigger picture, a larger fight that hadn't stopped just because he was in a cage. Their loyalty, their unwavering faith from 3 different fronts, legal, public, and clandestine, was more fortifying than any physical training. They weren't just friends. They were pillars. They were holding up the roof while the commission tried to bring the building down on his head. The HPSC decided to force the issue. A week into his suspension, Director Surugame determined that the legal pressure from the Yaoyorozu family and the growing dissent at UA were becoming problematic. She needed to remove Naruto from Nezu's protection entirely. She authorized a forced transfer to a secure HPSC facility for his evaluation. The agent chosen for the task was a legend, a ghost in the system. A woman who had once been a top-ranking hero before being repurposed by the commission as their ultimate enforcer. The sniper hero, Lady Nagant. It happened at dusk. Naruto was in his room when he felt a shift in the air. A new presence. Not the chameleon agent. This one was different, lethal, the feeling of a predator. His door opened. It wasn't a teacher. It was a woman with long, two-toned hair, dressed in a sleek, dark uniform. Her arm was a grotesque fusion of flesh and a high-caliber rifle. Lady Nagant. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her voice calm and professional, but with an undercurrent of profound weariness. By order of the Hero Public Safety Commission, you are to be transferred into our custody. Please come with me. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. Naruto looked at her, and his senses told him more than her words did. He felt her immense power, her incredible skill. But underneath it, he felt a deep, abiding despair. The same cage he was in, she had been in for years. No, Naruto said, not with defiance, but with a simple finality. He stood up. Nagant sighed, a sound of regret. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. Her rifle arm snapped up. She didn't fire a normal bullet. She fired a round made of her own hardened hair, shaped and curved to ricochet off the walls of the small room, designed to pin him without killing him. To her, time seemed to slow down. The bullet left the barrel. To Naruto, it was moving in slow motion. He didn't dodge. He simply took one step to the left, and the bullet zipped past his ear. He flowed forward, closing the distance between them in the cramped room in a single, fluid motion. Nagant, a master of long-range combat, was suddenly in a close-quarters fight she hadn't anticipated. She tried to bring her rifle to bear as a club, but he was already inside her guard. His hand shot out, not in a fist, but with his fingers open. He didn't strike her arm. He tapped 3 precise points along the rifle mechanism, channeling tiny, sharp pulses of vitality. The firing mechanism seized, The delicate internal workings instantly jammed. Her quirk weapon was rendered useless. She stared at her rifle in shock. No one had ever been able to get that close, let alone disable her primary weapon so easily. She reacted on instinct, her non-gun arm lashing out in a strike. Naruto caught her fist in his open palm, his grip like steel. He held her there, their faces inches apart. They pointed you at me, he said, his voice low and intense. They told you I was a threat, a monster. A nail that needed to be hammered down. Nagant's eyes widened. He was echoing the very words the director had used in her briefing. They point you at a target, Naruto continued, his gaze boring into hers, but they never ask you to see the person, do they? They just tell you to pull the trigger. How long have you been their gun, Nagant? How long since you chose your own targets? His words were more devastating than any physical blow. They struck at the core of her identity. At the truth she had buried for years, that she had once been a hero who believed in justice, and was now just an assassin who followed orders. The hope in her had died long ago, replaced by a cynical obedience. He let go of her fist. He wasn't her enemy. He was a mirror. He walked past her, out the open door. I'm not going with you. I'm not going to be another one of their weapons. If they want me, they can come get me. All of them. He was walking out. He was just leaving. Nagant stood frozen in the room, her disabled rifle arm hanging uselessly at her side. A maelstrom of emotion swirled within her. Shock, humiliation, and a tiny, long-dormant spark of something she hadn't felt in years. A flicker of defiant hope. He hadn't just defeated her. He had seen her. Naruto walked calmly, out of the dormitory building and into the evening air of the UA campus. The chameleon agent decloaked, blocking his path, her hand reaching for a radio. Naruto didn't even look at her. He just kept walking. Get out of my way. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight, a pressure that made the hardened HPSC agent stumble back, her training screaming at her to engage, but her survival ends. Tinked screaming louder to let the apex predator pass. He reached the edge of campus, the massive gates looming before him. He was breaking Nezu's one condition. He was leaving. But he knew he couldn't stay. The HPSC wouldn't stop. They would escalate until they had him. The only way to win was to change the game. He leapt. A single, powerful bound that carried him up and over the 50-foot wall, landing silently on the street outside. He was free, a fugitive from the most powerful organization in the country. He stood on a rooftop a few blocks away, the city lights spreading out before him like a galaxy of captured stars. He was an outcast, a target. He had no home, no allies in the system. A soft whirring sound made him turn. Momo's drone. A moment later, he heard the gentle release of pressure as Ochaco floated down from a higher building, landing softly beside him. And from the sky, a streak of spiraling energy resolved into Nejire, who floated in front of him, her expression serious. They had seen the confrontation on the campus security feeds Sir Night-Eye had given them access to. They had seen him walk away. And they had come. That was a stupidly brave and bravely stupid thing to do, Nejire said. Her voice soft. Where will you go? Momo asked, her practical mind already working on logistics, safe houses, new identities. They won't stop hunting you, Ochaco added, her hand clenched into a determined fist. But you're not alone. We won't let you be. Naruto looked at the three of them, standing with him on that rooftop, silhouetted against the city. Ochaco, his heart. Momo, his mind. Nejire, his spirit. They had come to him not out of duty, but out of faith. They had defied the rules, the risks, to stand with him. In his old life, he had chased acknowledgement his whole childhood. He had fought and bled and screamed to be seen. Here, in this new world, he had tried to be invisible, and yet, these three saw him more clearly than anyone ever had. A genuine smile, the first in days, touched his lips. The weariness was gone, replaced by a calm, unshakable resolve. The HPSC had tried to isolate him, to break him by making him an island. They had failed. He wasn't an island. He was a continent. They want a war, Naruto said, looking out at the city. Let's give them one. He was no longer just Naruto Uzumaki, a student. He was the unsanctioned leader of a small, terrifyingly powerful faction of his own. And they were about to remind the world what a real hero looked like. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Herald's Gambit. The week that followed Naruto's escape was a phantom war fought in the alleys and airwaves of Japan. The HPSC, utterly humiliated by Lady Nagant's failure and Naruto's public defiance, officially branded him a fugitive. His face was plastered on every news channel, no longer as a person of interest, but as a dangerous renegade with an unstable, city-threatening quirk. A national manhunt was underway, but they were hunting a ghost. Naruto, with the help of his unlikely triad of allies, simply vanished. Momo's family resources provided a network of untraceable safe houses, burner phones, and encrypted communication lines at even the Commission's top analysts couldn't crack. Sir Night-Eye's clandestine support fed them real-time intelligence on HPSC troop movements, allowing Naruto to always be 2 steps ahead of his pursuers. He moved between a quiet suburban apartment owned by Yaoyorozu Shell Corporation and the grimy, forgotten tunnels of the city's underbelly, never staying in one place for more than 12 hours. He was not, however, hiding. He was hunting. Guided by Night-Eye's data and Nejire's high-level access through Ukyu, they began to piece together the Herald's plan. The synchronized attacks weren't random acts of terror. They were targeted strikes on locations with unique energy signatures, power plants, research labs, and even ancient shrines. They were drawing a map, and Naruto's instincts screamed that they were preparing for something on a scale that made the USJ attack look like a street brawl. His companions became his arms and legs in the world he could no longer openly walk. Ochaco, under the guise of her internship, gathered information at the street level, her unassuming nature allowing her to overhear conversations between police and low-level heroes. Momo, a genius of logistics, correlated the data, her strategic mind identifying patterns the pros had missed. Nejire acted as their eyes in the sky, her patrols with Ukyu allowing her to spot unusual energy fluctuations that signaled Herald activity. They became a fluid, decentralized intelligence unit, operating in the blind spots of the HPSC's massive, clumsy manhunt. In the calm before the inevitable storm, the bond between the 4 of them solidified into something unbreakable. In the quiet moments within a sterile safe house, listening to the rain patter against the window, they were not soldiers in a secret war, but just teenagers against the world. One evening, Naruto was tending to a series of cuts on his arm, a reminder of a close call with a pro-hero task force. Ochaco came and sat beside him, gently taking the antiseptic wipe from his hand. "You don't have to do this all by yourself, you know," she said softly, her touch surprisingly steady as she cleaned a wound on his forearm. "We're here, too." He looked at her, at the fierce determination in her soft brown eyes. She wasn't just offering help, she was demanding to share the burden. "I know," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he rarely showed. "In my last life, I had people I cared about. Precious people. I fought to protect them. I built a world for them." He paused, the phantom weight of a Hokage's hat settling on his brow. "I thought I was done fighting. But you guys," he looked from her to Momo, who was watching from across the room, and thought of Nejire, their link to the outside world. "You're my precious people in this life. You're the reason I'm willing to do this again." It wasn't a confession of romantic love, not yet. It was something deeper, a declaration of belonging, an acknowledgement that his heart, which he had tried so hard to shield, had found new anchors. Ochaco's breath hitched, her cheeks flushing, but she didn't look away. Momo gave a small, almost imperceptible smile, a silent acceptance of his words. They understood. The promise to survive, to come back to each other, hung unspoken in the air. Their quiet war was about to become very loud. Momo's analysis finally bore fruit. "They're not just drawing a map," she announced during an encrypted conference call, her face illuminated by the glow of a dozen monitors. "They're creating a circuit. The locations they've targeted form a massive, city-wide array. If my projections are correct, they're preparing to activate it tonight. The focal point of the entire circuit is here." A map appeared on their screens. A red circle pulsed over. The newly constructed Takamagahara Sky Spire, the tallest building in Japan, a monument to the nation's prosperity and technological prowess. "They're going to turn the entire city into a sacrifice," Naruto realized, his blood running cold. The first herald stood on the observation deck of the Sky Spire, the wind whipping at his dark cloak. Below him, the city was a tapestry of light and life, a vibrant, chaotic symphony he was about to silence. His elite guard, a dozen cultists clad in the same gray-trimmed robes, stood silently behind him. Several pro-heroes, their eyes glowing with a dull, lifeless gray, stood with them. They were the ones who had been captured in the earlier attacks, their wills broken, their minds now enslaved to the void. He held a device, not a rod, but a sphere of swirling, dark energy. The heart of the void. The offerings have been consecrated, the first herald said, his voice echoing in the minds of his followers. The unlife of the Nomu primed the pump. The foolish heroes provided the conduits. Now, we open the gate. We will feed this screaming world to the great silence, and in its perfect, final emptiness, we will find unity. He raised the sphere. Below, in a dozen locations across the city, his heralds activated their draining rods in unison. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. A low, gut-wrenching hum vibrated through the city. Lights flickered and died, cars sputtered to a halt. And quirks simply turned off. Across Musudafu, heroes and villains alike suddenly found themselves powerless. A hero with a strength-enhancing quirk stumbled, his muscles turning to jelly. A villain with a fire quirk tried to summon a flame and only managed a puff of warm air. The fundamental law of their world had been suspended. A wound in reality, a shimmering vortex of pure blackness, began to tear open in the sky directly above the Sky Spire. It was the void, and its influence was poison. Despair, lethargy, and a soul-crushing emptiness washed over the city in waves. People on the streets stopped, their faces going slack, the will to even run draining away. The HPSC and the remaining pro-heroes were thrown into utter disarray. Their entire system, built on the foundation of quirks, had crumbled in seconds. But 4 people were ready. Naruto, Ochaco, Momo, and Nejire, all wearing improved versions of the energy capacitors Momo had designed, were already in motion. They felt the draining effect, a heavy, oppressive blanket, but the capacitors buffered the worst of it, allowing their quirks to function, albeit at a reduced capacity. Their counterattack was a coordinated blitz. Nejire, a comet of blue-white energy, was the first to strike. She flew directly at the Sky Spire, her spirals of energy the only vibrant color in the darkening sky. She was the distraction. All units, converge on the Sky Spire. A frantic HPSC commander shouted over the failing comms. The renegade Uzumaki and his accomplices are attacking the tower. They still didn't understand. They thought he was the cause. On the ground, the real assault began. Momo and Ochaco, riding a high-speed, electrically powered hoverbike, raced toward the tower. They weren't aiming for the building itself. The primary conduits are underground. Momo shouted over the wind, pointing to a massive power substation at the base of the tower. That's what's channeling the energy from the other locations. We cut that. We cripple the ritual. They were met by a squad of the enthralled pro-heroes. The heroes, their skills intact but their faces empty, moved to intercept. Ochaco acted first. She slapped the side of their hoverbike, making it momentarily weightless. Momo steered them into a sharp, impossible turn, dodging a blast of concussive force from a corrupted hero. Ochaco then touched the ground, her quirk straining. She didn't lift the street. She loosened it, turning the asphalt into a treacherous morass of floating, shifting plates. The heroes stumbled, their charge broken. Momo's hands were a blur. Her quirk, though weakened, was still functional. She created a volley of high-intensity EMP grenades. Ochaco. Now, Ochaco touched the grenades, making them weightless. Then flung them with a desperate shove. They sailed over the heads of the corrupted heroes and landed squarely in the substation. A silent flash of blue light, and the entire power grid for the tower went dark. The stream of energy flowing into the sky flickered and dimmed. They had drawn first blood. Meanwhile, Naruto was the tip of the spear. He didn't bother with the doors. He ran straight up the side of the 108-story skyscraper, a golden blur against the dark glass, heading for the source. He burst onto the observation deck, landing in a crouch. The wind howled around him. He saw the first herald, the vortex in the sky, and the assembled guards. He also saw Nejire, locked in a furious battle with 2 of the strongest corrupted heroes, her powerful blasts being neutralized by their coordinated defense. The offering arrives, the first herald said, a cruel smile in his voice. You have only delayed the inevitable. The gate is stable. My master is already here. He needs only to be fed. I'm not on the menu, Naruto snarled. He moved. His speed was terrifying. He flowed through the elite cultists, a whirlwind of precise, debilitating strikes. A jab to a throat, a kick to a knee, a palm strike to a chest. He moved like a surgeon, dismantling the guards one by one without wasting a single motion. This freed Nejire, who unleashed a massive, spiral-ing wave of energy that sent the corrupted heroes crashing into the deck's railing. About time, Slowpoke, she yelled, a grin flashing across her face despite the apocalyptic scene. Now, it was just Naruto and the first herald. You cannot comprehend the peace we offer, the herald said, raising the dark sphere. My family died in the crossfire of a hero and villain, a meaningless casualty of your chaotic world. Their screams were silenced. Soon, all screams will be. Peace isn't silence, Naruto shot back, his voice raw with a sudden, burning anger. It's the noise of people laughing, crying, living. It's the sound of a world worth protecting. He charged. The herald met him, not with physical force, but with the power of the void itself. He thrust the sphere forward, and a wave of absolute nothingness washed over Naruto. It wasn't an attack on his body, it was an attack on his soul. It showed him visions. Jiraiya sinking into the depths, Neji dying in his arms, Sasuke leaving the village. It preyed on his deepest failures, his most profound regrets. But this time, he wasn't alone. Through the psychic assault, he heard Momo's voice, a faint transmission from their comms. The conduits are severed. But the vortex is still drawing power directly from the environment. You have to destroy the focal point. He heard Ochaco's voice, full of strained effort but unwavering faith. We're holding them off. We believe in you, Naruto. Their voices were his anchor. Their faith was his shield. He gritted his teeth, the visions of his past fading, replaced by the faces of his new precious people. He had to end this. Now, he reached deep inside himself, not just pricking Kurama's power, but tearing a chunk of it free. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. Red, malevolent chakra erupted from him, cloaking him in a shimmering, one-tailed shroud of a fox. His teeth elongated into fangs, his nails into claws. His eyes were no longer human, they were the burning, slitted eyes of a demon. The raw power that radiated from him was so immense that the glass of the observation deck cracked and shattered. The first herald stumbled back, genuine fear in his voice for the first time. What is this power? It is life, but it is rage. It is a star and a beast. Naruto didn't answer. He raised a clawed hand, and a swirling ball of red and black energy, a Bijudama in its most nascent form, began to coalesce in front of his mouth. It was unstable, chaotic, a sphere of pure, apocalyptic power. He's going to destroy the whole tower. Nejire yelled in horror, but Naruto wasn't aiming at the herald. He was aiming at the sky, at the focal point of the ritual, at the heart of the void clutched in the herald's hand. He unleashed the blast. A beam of pure destruction shot upward, not at the vortex, but at the device that was holding it open. The first herald, knowing he couldn't dodge, threw the sphere directly into the path of the beam. The two forces met, the ultimate expression of life and rage against a concentration of pure nothingness. The resulting explosion was silent. A sphere of perfect blackness expanded, swallowing the sound, the light, the very energy of the Bijudama. But it was too much. The fragile balance of the void heart shattered. The focal point was destroyed. The vortex in the sky shuddered violently. The draining effect across the city vanished in an instant. Quirks everywhere flared back to life with a vengeance. The first herald was thrown back, his cloak shredded, his body broken. He lay on the ground, defeated. He looked up at Naruto, who was panting. The red chakra receding, leaving him shaky and exhausted. The herald started to laugh, a wet, gurgling sound. You think you've won? He coughed, blood staining his lips. Foolish child. The ritual wasn't to open the door. It was to stabilize it. I was just holding it open for him. He pointed a trembling finger at the sky. He's already here. Naruto looked up. The vortex was no longer expanding. But it wasn't closing either. It was stable, a permanent wound in the sky. A gateway. And from its depths, something was beginning to stir. It had no form, no shape. It was a patch of sky where the stars had gone out. A darkness that consumed light. The void entity, the true master, had its anchor in their world. Its presence began to bleed out, a passive, atmospheric presu. That was 1,000 times worse than the draining field. It was the feeling of absolute, final despair. The hope of every living thing in the city began to drain away, not stolen, but simply seasoned. To exist in the face of such perfect emptiness. On the ground, heroes and villains alike, their quirks returned, found themselves frozen, staring up at the sky with dead eyes. All Might, arriving on the scene, felt his strength leave him. Not his physical power, but his will, his spirit as the symbol of peace. He faltered, the sheer hopelessness of it all crashing down on him. The HPSC, with all their guns and soldiers, were just ants looking up at a boot that was about to fall. Naruto, still simmering with the last vestiges of Kurama's rage, stood on the shattered deck of the world's tallest building. And looked up at the swirling abyss. The true enemy had arrived. And for the first time, he felt a cold, terrifying certainty, he might not be strong enough. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Sage and the Void. The silence was the most terrifying thing. The chaotic symphony of the city, the sirens, the screams, the distant hum of life, had been snuffed out, replaced by a profound, unnatural quiet. Below the sky spire, millions of people stood frozen, their faces turned to the sky, their eyes vacant. The void's presence wasn't an attack, it was a cancellation. It didn't instill fear, it erased hope, leaving behind a hollow husk of despair. On the observation deck, Naruto felt it like a physical weight, a glacier of absolute nihilism pressing down on his soul. The fiery rage of Kurama's chakra, which had burned so brightly moments before, sputtered and dimmed against the sheer, overwhelming emptiness. The void was a black hole for emotion, for life itself. Nejire, floating beside him, was trembling. Her vibrant blue aura reduced to a faint, flickering candle flame. I can't. What is this? She whispered, her voice barely audible. It feels so cold, so empty. It's feeding, Naruto said, his own voice strained. He could feel it. The void was passively drinking in the ambient life force of the city, the collective will of millions, growing denser, more present. From the wound in the sky, the darkness began to coalesce. It dripped down like black ink in water, forming a shape over the city, a colossal, shifting silhouette of pure nothingness. It had no defined features, only a vaguely humanoid form that was constantly unraveling and reforming, a hole in the shape of a god. The first herald, still lying broken on the ground, laughed one last time. Behold, the perfect silence, the final unity, and then his own life force, his own will to live, was extinguished. He dissolved into a pile of gray dust, his final offering to the emptiness he worshipped. The HPSC, paralyzed by the wave of despair, finally broke. The sheer, overwhelming nature of the threat shattered their protocols and their arrogance. A frantic, desperate order, broadcast over all channels, crackled through Naruto's comms. It was from Director Tsurugame herself, her voice stripped of all its cold authority, now just the thin, terrified plea of a woman watching the end of the world. Fugitive designation, rescinded. Naruto Uzumaki, we need you. For God's sake, do something. We grant you full sanction. Whatever you need, just stop it. The plea was pathetic, meaningless. Sanction, authority, what good were they against the end of all things? The void entity turned its non-existent gaze upon the brightest point of light in its new domain, Naruto. And it attacked. The assault was not physical. It was metaphysical. Naruto's world dissolved. He was no longer on the tower. He was standing in the valley of the end, rain lashing down, looking at the back of a 14-year-old Sasuke. I have my own path to walk, Naruto. And you're not on it. The scene shifted. He was in a dark cave, kneeling before a dying Nagato. Your story is a sequel to the one I failed to write. Do not let it end in the same tragedy. It shifted again. The fourth great ninja war. He saw Hinata, impaled, falling before him. He saw Neji, a hole in his chest, smiling at him. Because you called me a genius. The void was using his own memories, his own soul, as a weapon against him. It was showing him every failure, every loss, every moment of pain. It was trying to drown him in the despair of his own past. To make him believe that all his struggles were pointless, that everyone he ever loved was gone, that he was, and always had been, utterly alone. The promise of the void was simple: stop fighting. Give up. It will all be over. There will be no more pain. He stumbled, his knees hitting the cracked glass of the observation deck. The red chakra vanished completely. The golden light of his vitality flickered, threatening to go out. The weight of 2 lifetimes of sorrow was crashing down on him. He was just a boy, a dead man in a new world, and he was so tired. And then, through the storm of his own grief, a voice cut through. Naruto. It was Ochaco. Her voice, tinny and strained through the comms, was an anchor in the hurricane. He looked up, his vision blurry. On a dozen screens across the ruined observation deck, which were still somehow drawing power, her face appeared. Momo, using every ounce of her genius, had hacked the city's emergency broadcast system, piggybacking on the HPSC's desperate plea. "Don't you dare give up." Ochaco's voice was raw, choked with tears, but it burned with an unshakable fire. "I don't care what you're seeing, what it's telling you. Look at us. We are here. We are real. You are not alone." Another face appeared. Momo. Her usual composure was gone, her face pale with terror, but her eyes were locked on the screen, on him. "All your uggles have meaning because they led you here. To us. You are the culmination of your past, Naruto, not its prisoner. You taught us to be stronger. Now let us be your strength." A third face. Nejire. She had landed on the deck. Her own energy nearly extinguished, but she crawled over to him, grabbing his arm. Her touch was cold, but it was real. "Hey, Slowpoke," she whispered, her voice cracking. You promised you were done being a weapon. So don't be a weapon. Be a hero. Our hero." Their words, their faith, they were a shield, not of energy, but of connection. They were a truth more powerful than the void's lies. His past wasn't a prison. It was a foundation. Every loss, every tear, every drop of blood had forged him. He wasn't Naruto Uzumaki, the container of the 9 tails, or Naruto, the outcast of Konoha. He wasn't the boy who had failed to save his best friend, or the Hokage who had shouldered the world. And he wasn't just a reincarnated soul hiding in a new reality. He was all of them. He stopped fighting his past. He stopped running from it. He opened his arms and embraced it. The memories of loss became memories of love. The pain of failure became the lesson of perseverance. The loneliness of his childhood became the reason he cherished his bonds now. He reached inside himself, to the very core of his being. He found the warm, steady sun of his vitality, the quirk of this new life. And he found the last, deep reserves of Kurama's chakra, the final gift from his oldest friend. He didn't just borrow its power. He didn't just unleash its rage. He merged them. He accepted who he was. Naruto Uzumaki, the 7th Hokage of Konoha, and a student of UA. High, the Jinchuriki of the 9-tailed fox, and the friend of Ochaco, Momo, and Nejire. He was the bridge between 2 worlds. And in that moment of perfect, absolute self-acceptance, his power evolved. A column of pure, golden energy erupted from him, blasting into the sky and punching a hole through the oppressive despair. It was not the malevolent red of the demon fox, nor the simple warmth of his vitality. It was something new, a divine, transcendent light. His black t-shirt and cargo pants dissolved, replaced by a long, flowing golden coat. On his back, 9 Tomo swirl marks appeared, surrounding the Uzumaki spiral. The 6 paths sage mode. Not an echo of it. Not a memory. The real thing. Reborn. Manifested not through a gift from a ghost, but earned through the acceptance of his entire being. He was the sage of the hero world. He floated into the air, a beacon of impossible hope in a world that had forgotten the meaning of the word. He was a sun against the darkness, and the void, for the first time, felt something akin to fear. It recoiled. It doesn't understand, Naruto said, his voice now calm, resonant, echoing with a gentle power that pushed back the despair. It's a being of pure entropy, of subtraction. It only knows how to take away. It doesn't know how to add. He looked down at the city. at the millions of hollowed-out people. He could feel them, their flickering life forces, their connections to each other, buried under the blanket of nothingness. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his very essence. "Lend me your strength," he whispered, not just to his friends, but to everyone. He became a conduit. He drew upon the faint, buried embers of hope and love from every soul in the city. The mother's love for her child, the rivalry between friends, the quiet affection of an old married couple, the fierce desire of every hero to protect. He gathered all these tiny, insignificant lights, these beautiful, chaotic pieces of life. The void attacked again, throwing a wave of absolute nullification at him. Naruto met it, not with a fist, but with an open palm. He didn't try to destroy the void. He didn't try to fight it. He began to fill it. He poured the collected life force of the city into the emptiness. He poured light, color, sound. He poured memory, the taste of Ichiraku ramen, the feeling of a swing under the sun, the sound of a friend's laughter. He poured emotion, love, anger, joy, sadness, regret, and hope. He poured the infinite, messy, beautiful complexity of life into a being that could only comprehend a single, simple concept: the end. The void shrieked, a soundless scream that tore at the fabric of reality. It was being overloaded. It was a vacuum being force-fed a universe. The simplicity of its existence could not compute the infinite complexity of life. It was like trying to pour the ocean into a glass. Life isn't perfect, Naruto's voice boomed, a declaration of faith to the entire world. It's messy, it's painful, it's chaotic, but it's worth it. Every single, stupid, beautiful moment of it is worth it. He thrust his hand forward, and the full, unrestrained torrent of life, a universe of color and feeling, surged into the heart of the void. The shifting black silhouette began to unravel. Cracks of golden light spread across its form. It tried to retreat, to pull back into its wound in reality, but it was too late. It was full, overloaded, poisoned by the one thing it could not understand. With a final, silent implosion, the void entity dissolved. It didn't explode. It simply ceased to be. Its own nature of nothingness turned upon itself. The wound in the sky, no longer sustained, sealed itself shut, leaving behind a clear, star-filled night. As the oppressive despair vanished, a collective gasp swept across the city. Millions of people blinked, looking at their hands, at each other, as if waking from a long, terrible dream. The world was loud again. It was alive. Naruto floated in the sky for a moment longer, the golden light around him slowly fading. He drifted back down to the observation deck, the sage's cloak dissolving back into his tattered clothes. He was exhausted, drained to his very soul, but he was at peace. He landed, and his legs gave out. Before he could fall, he was caught. Ochaco on one side, Momo on the other, with Nejire holding him from the front. They held him up, their combined strength just enough. In the aftermath, the world was irrevocably changed. The HPSC was disgraced, its authority shattered. Director Tsurugame resigned, and the entire organization was forcibly dismantled and restructured under the direct oversight of a council that included Nezu and several other trusted heroes. Lady Nagant, freed from her obligation, simply disappeared, leaving behind a note for Naruto that contained only 2 words: "Thank you." Naruto himself was no longer a fugitive or a student. He was a savior. He was offered the position of #1 hero, a title, a rank, anything he wanted. He refused it all. Instead, with the backing of the Yaoyorozu family and the newly restructured Hero Society, he established a new, independent organization. It wasn't for fighting villains. It was a global crisis response and rescue network, dedicated to proactive disaster relief and protecting people from threats that were beyond the scope of conventional heroics. Its headquarters was not a gleaming tower, but a sprawling, campus-like facility focused on training, research, and coordination. Its core leadership, Sir Night-Eye, his agency now fully integrated, handled intelligence. Momo Yaoyorozu, who had graduated early with honors, managed logistics and R&D. Ochaco Uraraka, now a full-fledged hero known for her incredible large-scale rescue techniques, led the field operations. And Nejire Hado, the vibrant, inquisitive heart of the Big Three, was its public face and lead combatant. Her power and personality a beacon of hope for the new generation. And Naruto. He held no official title. He was simply the founder. The center. The one they all turned to when the world started to go dark. Months later, the city was healed, scarred but alive. The Takamagahara Sky Spire had been renamed the Beacon of Hope. Naruto stood on a grassy hill overlooking the city, he setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The wind was gentle, carrying the distant, happy sounds of life. He wasn't alone. Ochaco leaned her head on his right shoulder, her presence a warm, steady comfort. Momo leaned on his left, her quiet strength a solid, reassuring weight. Nejire floated just in front of him, upside down, a playful grin on her face as she poked his nose. They weren't a secret. They weren't a scandal. They were just them. A family forged in fire and shadow, the symbol of a new era built not just on power, but on connection. Their relationship was as unique and complex as they were. A balance of heart, mind, and spirit that centered around him, and that he, in turn, centered his world around. He looked at their faces, at the city he had saved, at life he had built not by running from his past, but by embracing it. The quiet life he had once craved had been a fantasy. This was better. This was real. He smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached his eyes. Free of the ghosts of his past and the burdens of his future. He was finally home. Let's go home, he said. Chapter 7 End.